think that black parents should tell their children everything, do you see? But instead of, well, I don't want to tell the child because it really is so horrible and I don't want to think about it. Do you see? That's incorrect.
What does that produce in the child?
Well, it's just a lack of understanding. Do you see? You have the child standing at the chessboard and you don't tell them what the game is all about. You don't tell them the plays that are going to come from the other side of the board, so the child is in a state of, you know, being checkmated, or the other side keeps saying check. And so the child just stands there. I can't play this game. I don't really know what's happening. As a matter of fact, I say that black people greet each other by saying what's happening because we don't know what's going on. You see, now is the time, before we enter the 21st century, for us to fully understand exactly and specifically what white supremacy is all about in people at all ages.
Education of our children as a clinical psychiatrist. And we had an ongoing relationship as it related to the success that I was having in the classroom. And it was very important. Our relationship was very interesting because she was able to give me the theoretical understanding of educating our children and the importance of being honest with them. And that's what this clip does. It talks about the importance of telling our children the truth. And she compares it to a game, playing chess. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to play it.
Children everything, you see, but instead of, well, I don't want to tell the child because it really is so horrible and I don't want to think about it. You see, that's incorrect.
What does that produce in the child?
Well, it's just a lack of understanding. You see, you have the child standing at the chessboard and you don't tell them what the game is all about. You don't tell them the plays that are going to come from the other side of the board, so the child is in a state of, you know, being checkmated, or the other side keeps saying check. And so the child just stands there. I can't play this game. I don't really know what's happening. As a matter of fact, I say that black people greet each other by saying what's happening because we don't know what's going on. You see, now is the time, before we enter the 21st century, for us to fully understand exactly and specifically what white supremacy is all about, and people at all ages should know.
And you see, the gentleman that's interviewing her is our brother Listerville Middleton, who had a television program. He was, I don't want to say way ahead of his time, because that's, for me, that's a misnomer. That's not the way we should look at it. He was just on time.
That's right.
You see, and he interviewed some of the greatest minds that were available at that time. And as you can hear, she's talking about this was before the 21st century, before we got into 2000. And what she said is important because what she just said, I can verify as a New York City Board of Education teacher. I can verify it. I can verify telling the children the truth. The children can handle the truth. The challenge becomes, can the adults handle telling the children the truth? And to look at them, because children are going to ask you questions as to what happened. And some of us, we get caught up because we feel that we can't tell them all truth. Okay? So there come a point in time where we just kind of get into a catatonic state because we don't know how to answer that next question that the children are going to ask that is so pure in thought. Because as adults, we're at a certain point in our existence. But with children, they're pure, they're fresh. You're putting information in, and this is why I started teaching in Gary, Indiana. I went out to Gary for a job that had nothing to do with education. And I taught in Gary, Indiana, high school. I taught radio and television. And at the time, the teacher that taught radio and television had gone on sabbatical. Talk about divine timing. You see, everything works in divine time. And I know that we look at this and we get into the twilight zone, or we get into concepts of spookism, and this is what has hurt us as a people. Because when you're around nature, there are things that happen that are so natural, yet in this generation, in this civilization, in the Western mindset, it's considered Twilight Zone. It's considered that it's like spookism. You know, be afraid of those voices in your head. When those voices in your head are your ancestors talking to you constantly, attempting to tell you, to guide you, to take you to certain places. And my experience being, just for those that may want to know, I was educated in South Central Bronx, but I had taught high school. And just to give you a little bit of background in terms of my experiences is that the first day of school in Gary, Indiana, can they still pick me up on live? Okay. My first day of school, high school, August of 1977, it's time for lunch, and we go down to the lunchroom. There's a faculty cafeteria area there, and then you have the student area here. And and everybody got online. Everybody went on the same line for lunch, but the faculty went off into the lounge for them, and the students stayed out here. I'm a young brother now at this point in time. Some of the students that I had were not that much younger than me. In fact, some of them might have been my same age. And I got online, and the faculty were allowed to go in front, okay? Now, you know, back in the day, or even now, we call it skipping, okay? And folk don't like to be skipped. Even as a faculty member, you know, when you get up on somebody like that, you know, they sometimes don't appreciate that. So I got online, and I was standing behind a student. You know, we were chit-chatting, talking, you know. And one of the faculty members beckoned me to come forward. They said, you know, you don't have to get online. You know, you just go right to the front. So I went, okay, and then I looked back and I noticed that some of the students wasn't feeling it, but respect. Right. Okay. So the next day, okay, and then I go into the faculty lounge, and it's the first day of school. Everybody's back from vacation, and you know how you feel. For those who are educators, one of the most wonderful things is summer vacation, but one of the most difficult things to get used to is coming back in August or September, whenever you come back, to a student. So I stay online. And so I get online, I got my lunch. Students say to me, "Where are you sitting?" And I say, "Where are you sitting?" He said, "I'm sitting over here." I said, "Well, can I sit with you?" He said, "Yeah, come on." From that day on, I always ate with students. Okay? And I started asking them questions about culture. You know, what do you know about Malcolm X? You know, what do you know about, you know, Egypt? Because at that time we didn't call it Kemet, so to speak. And so, you know, I just started talking. Now, long story short, it got to a point where my being the only teacher, because by this time they knew who I was. They knew I was part of the faculty. They knew that I taught. And so students, you know those long tables that come out and then you sit down? Well, what they would do is they would arrange the tables around where I was sitting. Wow. And I would start teaching African history. There you go. Okay, right in the lunchroom. Mm-hmm. And we created a relationship with the students. I didn't have not one education course. I had not studied it because my background, I got my bachelor's degree in international politics with a minor in communication and Caribbean studies. So I didn't have no education, but what it was is that I had a college degree, and I was the disc jockey in radio station, WLTH, a newly acquired black-owned radio station. Seaway Bank had bought this black radio station in Gary, Indiana. They brought me to be the production manager and also the weekend disc jockey. And so my thing was, I didn't have those courses in college that create like a shadow boxing situation, okay? That's where you're gonna learn how to teach. How you gonna handle Mike Ali, you know? You know, and what happens when you have 3 or 4 of them in the classroom and one of them is a sister? Because in my career as an educator and as someone that has done lunch duty, if I had my choice between breaking up a fight with brothers and breaking up a fight with sisters, I'm breaking up the fight with the brothers. Because sisters know how to use every part of their body to be hurting people. And don't let them get the Vaseline out and start taking their jewelry off. Okay? Because then you're in real trouble. But that is my experience in the classroom. But what it was is they asked me, the students back in Gary, Indiana, they asked me, they said, you know, we have a roller skating club. We really like to roller skate. There was a roller skating rink outside of Gary. In Gary, Indiana, they had no movie house at this time. When the Ebony Fashion Fair came to Gary, they actually had the Ebony Affair in Roosevelt High School where I was. There was no banquet hall. There was nothing in Gary. Okay, Gary Hatchett, Mayor Gary Hatchett was the mayor of Gary at this time, 1977. They had nothing. That would be for the children, for the students, for the young people. No movie house, nothing. Okay? The Jackson 5's house was right behind Roosevelt High School. Not to mention William Marshall, Blackula. His house was around the corner, okay? And so they said, you know, there's a roller skating rink, and, you know, I mean, we go individually, but as a school, you know, I'd like to, and they said, would you be our faculty person to come with us? And I said, sure, because I like to roller skate. So I became the faculty advisor for the roller skating club in Gary, Indiana. At the time, maybe here you have it, in New York we don't have it, but they have a junior prom. And they asked me if I would be the faculty advisor for the junior prom. I said, sure. But in my mind, I'm wondering, why aren't the other adults part of these students' lives? You know, I just, you know, with all the things I was doing in my other job, you know, because my production manager was like from 5 o'clock until about 8 or 9, where, you know, we would do different types of commercials and things. And then weekend disc jockey was Saturday, Sunday. So it didn't interfere with me, but I wondered, why weren't the other faculty members part of these students' lives? I just didn't. And you see, that comes from just loving our people. You know, you want to go roller skating? Yeah, how can I help you? You know, you want a junior prom? How can I help you? So what I used to do is, remember Soul Train, Don Cornelius had already taken Soul Train to California. It had become, you know, across the country by this time, 1977. And, but Chicago, where he started Soul Train, still had a local program. And so I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have my television students, they're going to film, I'm going to have my radio students play the music, and I'm going to invite students in, I'm going to charge them a nickel to come in and dance. And my TV is, students are going to film them, and the radio is going to spin the music. So we used to have these sessions where the students would come into the studio. It was a beautiful television and radio studio, by the way, professional. And I learned from the students that they weren't allowed to touch anything. You know, that they could only just watch as the teacher would tell them what to do. And I said, well, how are you going to learn like that? And so I had the students up on it, you know, and some of the adults complained because they said that, you know, a lot of times students are touching things, they need to be repaired. And so I just looked at them, I said, well, what are you getting paid for? You're the repair person. Well, you're just complaining because you are to work now. So go in there and repair that television camera or the tables, you know, the turntables. So we would come in, and then what I did, see, because I'm raising money for the junior prom. So we charge everybody a nickel to come in and dance. I let everybody know what's going on. And the treasurer of the junior class would collect the money and things like that. And then we'd go down to the cafeteria and we would show it on TV. And that was Roosevelt Soul Train, okay? And they would, and of course now, you know, you got students that are going to act up and dance and do all sorts of crazy stuff. And everybody knows them, so everybody's laughing. But then what happened was the discipline in the lunchroom changed. Because everybody conducted themselves properly. I would charge them a nickel to watch Roosevelt Soul Train, okay? The people in charge reached out to the sabbatical teacher that went on sabbatical and said, look, you're going to have to cut your sabbatical short, because the teacher we got up in here now, I can promise you, you have a job, your tenure, but I can't promise you you're going to teach radio or television, because no one is going to let Mr. Coleman go, because they love him. He came back, and they fired me. And then I realized that was my purpose in life. I had a student, I tell this story all the time, because he changed my life. He came to class every day. Okay, now remember what Francis Cresswell is saying. Okay, he was a student, dressed impeccably, was always on time, did all of his homework assignments. Okay, stayed to the end, never did a thing but the work. Very cordial, very respectful. Right around the Misgiving holiday, probably sometime around this time that year in '77, he comes to me and he has a request to be excused from class, and he gives it to me, and he is going to court, and there's some serious questions about his behavior. Okay, so very serious, very serious. And I said, wow. I said, you know, you're a phenomenal person. How could you get... He said, well, shit happens. Okay, that's what he said. And I said, okay. And I said, but you're my best student. And I said, you never miss class. You're always on time. You always participate. What's up? And he said, your class is the only class I come to. I come in for second period, and I leave before third. And I said, but why? He said, because I honestly believe you respect me. That changed my life. That's when I became a teacher. I went back and I resigned from my radio job. Now, I'm making 5 times the amount in radio than I am in teaching. Right. But there are times in life that money don't matter.
That's right. That's right.
And it's important that we all get on that train when that happens, to understand, okay, money is not important when certain things happen. When that young brother told me that, and he wasn't that much younger than me, when he told me that, I realized what my divine purpose was. And I went back and I spoke to the program director of the radio station, and I told him what I want to do. He said, no. He said, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to write a letter of resignation, because nobody's going to believe that you just freely decided to leave. Here you got your first radio gig. Once you get into radio, the first job you get is the most important. Once you get the first one, then you just build from that. Okay? I was on my way to Chicago to go to the radio station owned by Johnson Publishing. Tom Joyner was the big brother up there. He was the main guy. He was in New York, but Frankie Crocker was in New York. He was in Chicago. Tom Joyner was the joint. Okay? And I was thinking about going to Chicago in my radio career. But I was in Gary, Indiana, and all of a sudden, this happens to me. I wrote out my letter of resignation. And then I came back to New York via Washington, D.C., and because New York was where I lived, I became a teacher in South Central Bronx, 1979. The hit song on the radio was Rapper's Delight, okay? And I began teaching. And I began teaching kindergarten. I had to go back to school to get education credits. I couldn't even become a teacher until I went back and got 12 credits in education. 6 in reading and 6 in special ed. That's how I was able to do that. And in the summertime, I got my 12 credits, and I started teaching in October of 1979. I stayed in education. I became an assistant principal in 1982. But the one thing I came to realize about that is I couldn't do administration. I didn't want administration. I wanted to be with the students. Right. And this is where Dr. Francis Cresswell and I joined forces, because I was in the classroom. And I was able to take her advice and her teachings and bring it into the classroom and then explain to her, and she said, you can never leave the classroom. And so I always stayed. Like I was telling the brothers driving me, the last 7 years of my life, they did everything they could to get me out. Because when I was an administrator, I came to realize the difference between a contract number and a vendor number.
Okay.
And a vendor number is when you can only spend $2,500 per month. Well, per year. You could only spend $250 per month with a vendor. That's how they got black and Hispanic vendors out of the system. Because they encourage you to get a vendor number, but they never told you about the contract number. Once I got inside, see, I'm the spook who sat by the classroom door. Once I figured out what was going on, I began to tell the vendors how they could get a contract number. You want a contract number, because the difference is a vendor number, I can spend no more than $2,500 with you. A contract number is I can spend $25,000 with you right away. And so they kept us out by not letting us get in. But once we got in, because remember, at the time I'm getting into education in New York, this is where we start getting our first black superintendents, many of our black principals, because nobody allowed in those positions. And once I was able to get in, and then it got into the fact that you had a community school board that was elected by the community, then you started to have community control. And so this is happening in the mid-'70s, the early '70s, the late '60s, and by the time I'm getting in here, I'm beginning to realize I'm going to bring some of these black vendors in. And so I began, even Dr. Van Sertima, I worked with his wife Jacqueline and got his books into the Board of Education, thousands of dollars, because they locked them out, because they were in New Jersey. They locked them out. And so what I did is I taught them how to get, now to get a contract number, you need an administrator in the district to write a letter on behalf of your company that they need your material, that there's nobody else that they can, otherwise you got to take bids. And so what I did is I started teaching them how to get contract numbers. And then all of a sudden people started trying to figure out, how are all these black people getting all this money? Because it's taken away from all the other vendors of other cultures to get in. With stationery, there was a sister had a Harlem stationery store on 25th Street, spent thousands of dollars with her. There was another brother had a stationery in a bookstore down in Brooklyn, thousands of dollars with him. And then what happened is once you bring them in and they get a contract number, then they can do business with any district. But they got to get in first, and nobody would ever write those letters for them. When I got in, that was one of the first things I wanted to do. I started writing letters, started bringing black vendors in. I started, everybody's getting bagels and cream cheese and everything. I used to order from Golden Crust. I used to order them little cocktail patties. You know, I went to soul food restaurants. I used to get collard greens in my receptions, okay? Forget the pizza. Forget the spaghetti. Okay, we ain't in the calzone here, okay? And this, but the last 7 years of my life, I paid a price for that. Because they did everything they could to get me out. They were more mad at what I did financially than what teaching black history.
That's right.
And this is where it is. I was looking at money. I brought in community-based organizations that had never been allowed to go into a district. The thing about community-based organizations is that community-based organizations need a district or a school they can work in. If the school won't bring you in, the community school board is out and the school is out. When I brought the Caribbean Cultural Center in, when I brought different African American groups into the system, they were able to get grants because they had a school. I was in charge of 35 schools. So I was able to bring in activities where they brought in millions of dollars, okay, through grants into the school. So our school benefited by what they could do. So it was a collaboration. See, this is what we face as a people. Kwame Ture said, we're not out-peopled, we're out-organized. Organization.
That's it.
And being bold enough, as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said, be bold enough, be bold enough, be bold enough to do what you have to do for your people.
Yeah, that's right.
Blessings on Mayor David Dinkins. But I could have told him he wasn't going to get a second term. Do what you can for black folk. Stop trying to be nice to people, hoping you'll get a second term. You ain't going to get a second term. You getting the first term was a mistake. So you know you ain't getting a second term. So do everything. I did everything I could every year, figuring that was my last year.
Okay.
In fact, sometimes I even thought that was my last month in that position.
I know it.
And this is what we face as a people. We have to be brave. We have to be courageous.
Amen.
There ain't nothing wrong with fear. I'm a human being. I have every right to have fear, but I have no right not to have courage. Courage dismantles fear.
Good.
But as a human being, you have fears. In fact, I'm very wary of people that say that they're fearless. Because that means you're going to take me off the cliff with you. Because you ain't got no sense. And you just bold up here, okay, we're going to do this, and all of a sudden everybody starts falling off the cliff with you. No, I need you to tell me, listen, I have concerns, but let's get some courage. And I think this is what Frances Cress Welsing, in all of my experiences with her, wherever she was, I never heard her voice anywhere near above what you see. She conducted herself with dignity and with class and with respect, and she could tear people apart. And what she is saying is we must teach our children the truth. And I think that this is one of the things that so many of our leaders, Malcolm and Martin Luther King, 39 years of age, put everything they had on the line knowing, even Malcolm said, this is a time for martyrs. This was a time when black folks stood out there, men and women, stood out there and did what they had to do for the people. And we got a kind of concept that we were free. But freedom isn't something that's free. Freedom is something that you are. Malcolm was free. And I think it's important that as we move forward and understand what it is, and now that I've told you this story, I'd like to play that piece again so that you can take in what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing is telling us.
Black parents should tell their children everything, you see, but instead of, well, I don't want to tell the child because it really is so horrible and I don't want to think about it. You see, that's incorrect.
What does that produce in the child?
Well, just a lack of understanding. You see, you have a child standing at the chessboard and you don't tell them what the game is all about. You don't tell them the plays that are going to come from the other side of the board, so the child is in a state of, being checkmated, or the other side keeps saying check. And so the child just stands there. I can't play this game. I don't really know what's happening. As a matter of fact, I say that black people greet each other by saying what's happening because we don't know what's going on. You see, now is the time, before we enter the 21st century, for us to fully understand exactly and specifically what white supremacy is all about. And people at all ages should know.
Okay, okay, here's the presentation. Okay, now what I'd like to do is get into the presentation with us. Just to honor our sister. She was really, knowing her on a personal level as I did, she was truly a phenomenal person. The way she carried herself privately is the same way she carried herself publicly. She was an example of the highest that a human being can be. She was always respectful, and when I think of my encounters with her and just the way in which she just presented herself, her intelligence, her reserved way of, I've watched her cut people down, like zip, 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 and never raised her voice.
That's right.
Never cursed. Never said anything out of the way. Full sentences, short, clear, concise, and to the point. And she could disarm you. And it was she that often said, more powerful than an atomic bomb is self-respect and self-love. And as black folk, that's one of the things that I've often thought about as us as a people, and how we've been able to maintain ourselves through these years. And I realize that so many of us just want to do things to people. But the ability to analyze your situation and to be able to get to where you got is something that I want to, and what I've done with our young people and teaching them and talking to them and helping them understand who you are, you know? And also at the same time, help them understand something that Malcolm often said when he said self-defense isn't violence, it's intelligence.
There you go.
There is a time to be Malcolm and there's a time to be Martin. Ma'at, the concept of balance and harmony, allows us to know who to be. Don't be Malcolm when you should be Martin, and don't be Martin when you should be Malcolm. Know how to balance that. Understand how to balance that. My mother used to always say, Skip, that's my nickname, Skip, in order to defeat your enemy, you must think like your enemy. If you think like you're never going to be successful. And I can honestly tell you, being here in Florida, I understand your governor. And I want to thank him for being so truthful. Because even Malcolm said he had more respect for Barry Goldwater than Lyndon Johnson. Because at least Barry Goldwater will tell you he can't stand you.
There you go.
And so you know who you're dealing with. With due respect, I think that Governor DeSantis is being very honest with us. He's telling you, you're not going to teach our children how horrible we are. I'm going to ban these books. Just like they burned books years ago, just like they stole books before, now they're banning the book. It's the same exact thing, it's just a different, it's sophisticated savagery.
There you go.
Sophisticated, but they're savages. So the question becomes, what are we going to do? Teach the children the truth.
You got to teach them.
You got to teach them the rules of the game. Don't give them baseball rules when they're playing basketball. Don't tell them how to play golf when they're on a basketball court. You play according to the game that you're playing. You play by the rules. White supremacy is telling our men and women to hate each other as well as themselves.
There you go.
Malcolm said it. Who taught you to hate your nose, to hate your complexion, to hate the texture of your hair? You didn't learn that in Africa. Where did you learn that?
Well,
Where did you learn to want to be someone you were never born to be? The Creator don't make mistakes. However you look. Baby girl told me in my class, he said, Brother Booker T, my nose is too big. And I said, but honey, can you breathe? And she said, yeah. I said, well, it's right size. Now, if you couldn't breathe, I said, we might have to do a little something. But if you can breathe, that's the purpose of your nose. Who taught her her nose was too wide or too big? Who taught her that?
wow. Praise God. So sad.
Teach the children the truth.
Tell them the truth. That's right.
Specifically an African man. But enslaving African people, or it really applies to enslaving anybody. Taking away their right to exist, taking away their life, their liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and you superimposing yours. What Sheikh Anta Diop said was that when, in his book, The Civilization of Barbarism, he has a chapter, Why Cultural Identity? And in this chapter, he says, when someone wishes to oppress you or to enslave you, there are three things they'll take from you. They'll take your history, they'll take your language, and they'll take away your psychological factor. Your psychological factor is what Dr. Leonard Jeffries calls your VIPs, your values, your interests, and your principles. And then they will superimpose their history, their language, and their values, interests, and principles on you. And so the end result is that no matter what decision you come to in your life, it'll never be in your best interest because you're looking at the world through someone else's eyes for their own advantage. The enslavement of African people is equivalent to making men docile women who are at your beck and call. It is based in what we call psychosexual homoerotica, where they'll make a man almost like, you know, like Stephen in Django, that one that look out, like Malcolm said, the house Negro and the field Negro. Know the difference between the two? The house Negro is the one that say, when the master gets sick, boss, we sick. Okay? If the house is on fire, he said, master, our house on fire. Okay? Family, what's going on in America today? Boss, we ain't sick. You sick. America, my house ain't on fire. Your house is on fire. It's called a plantation mentality. That docile black man, we got a couple of them around us now. Okay, I ain't gonna name no names because that gets in trouble. Okay, but we got some names out here where we got docile black men. They are viewed like the European male's grandmother. You know, grandmother that is trying to make sure everything's all right with you and loving you. Nothing wrong with that if you're a grandmother. But if you're a black man, Houston, we got a problem. Okay? They delight in seeing black men in dresses. I'm not talking about LGBTQ. I'm not talking about homosexuality. That's a separate such situation altogether. I'm talking about perversion.
There you go.
There's a difference. And this is what we're getting tripped up in because we're confusing certain concepts as we move through a process. The European male structure, who is deficient in security in self, insecure, very fragile, being in the presence of a black man reminds them genetic annihilation. Your time is up. When there is a black man that is successful, now they don't mind you being successful according to their rules, but when you're successful according to your rules, you set in motion and you start tripping up on fear. Okay? They become fragile, they become insecure in their manhood because they always questioned it from the get anyway. And that is because they have no idea of the relationship they should have with their woman. So sometimes they not only want to be a man, but they also want to be a woman. And when they're coming up against a black man that is a man, it's one thing. But when they come upon a black man in a dress, they immediately feel superior. And it's psychological. And this is what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing is talking about. She's talking about these concepts of men wearing dresses. Listen, I mean, I have a problem with Tyler Perry, but what made Medea so famous was everybody had an aunt like that. But they were very comfortable in his presence. I'm not questioning his manhood. That's not my thing. I don't go there. In fact, I think he was quite slick to do Medea knowing that he'd become a billionaire by putting on a dress.
God gave it to him.
But behind that, there is a psychosexual, homoerotic thought in the Western European male insecure mind that would promote that, as they promote so many others wearing dresses. Remember, the ancient Cushites wore dresses. They wore kilts. It's not the dress or the kilt. It's the image that has been created in the mind of Western civilization. So when they take your history, they take your language, and they take your psychological factor, which are your values, your interests, and your principles. If you'll fall for that, you'll fall for anything, including wearing a dress in order to appease them. And whenever I come upon a brother who says all black women are gold diggers, I know he's never met a good black woman. When I meet a sister who says, I don't need a man, I know you ain't never met a good black man. Because if you ever met a good black man as a woman, or a good black woman as a black man, you would know how important they are.
Praise God.
To your balance in life.
Praise God.
See, I'm not into nation building. Nations rise and fall, and nations are created by people.
Okay.
I'm into dynasties.
All right now.
Dynasties are built by families.
Amen.
Dynasties ain't built on baby daddies. Okay, dynasties ain't built on mommies that raise their children. Nothing wrong with that, because I know there are so many like that.
Right.
What I'm saying, for us to get back to the natural way of things, we have to get back to the realization that it is the brother and the sister who bring forward dynasties. Now, with all the other things that we're facing as a people, we have a different world out here now.
It's very much so.
And at the same time, we pay respect to all those who choose to love who they love.
That's right.
But we have to do it with a balanced mind as an African, and not as a European, because he's in his situation because he don't know who he is.
All right now.
And this is what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing was trying to tell us. She wasn't talking about LGBTQ. She was talking about perversion.
Thank you.
She was talking about the delectable Negro. She was talking about the way in which the black man and the black woman and the black child has been a sexual desire for them historically, all the time. And we have to understand this. We have to put it in its proper perspective. We have to live and let live. We have to love and let love. White supremacy. Just to give you a little background on our sister, check out. She was secretary of the Trigonometry Club. She was part of Red Cross, the Phillips Honor Society, National Honor Society, the Drama Club, the Candidates Club, and Spanish Club. That was her. Frances Cress Welsing, a psychiatrist best known for writing the ISIS Papers, was born Frances Luella Cress in Chicago, Illinois, March 18th, 1935. Welsing, who was the child of the physician Henry Cress and teacher Ida Mae Griffin, grew up the middle of three daughters. She received her Bachelor's of Science from Antioch College in Ohio, 1957, and her medical degree, MD, from Washington, D.C.'s Howard University in 1962. After earning her MD, Welsing stayed in Washington, D.C., pursuing a career in child and general psychiatry. Welsing spent nearly 25 years working as a staff physician for D.C.'s Department of Human Services, and also as the clinical director of 2 schools catering to children with emotional troubles. Welsing opened her own private practice in D.C. in 1967. Through her published works and her research, Welsing sought to bring about a solution to the mental health problems of the black community by understanding racism. Okay. In 1991, Welsing published her most famous work, a collection of essays titled The ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors, which discuss in depth the issues of white supremacy and racism in the United States. In the ISIS papers, Welsing delved deeper into her theories of melanin deficiency among whites as the driver of racism, white supremacy, and white segregation. In the process of psychoanalyzing white racism, Welsing also discussed the importance of recognizing racial behaviors and symbols among blacks that were psychologically damaging and which needed to be countered and destroyed. Just some pictures, some visuals, just to get a look at the ISIS papers. Our Shiro, Frances Cress Welsing. LeGrand Clegg, Chief Deputy City Attorney, brilliant lawyer in Los Angeles. Had a chance to write on the back of her book, during the course of the struggle of African people against European racism, brutality, and domination, many innovative thinkers have risen from our ranks. The greatest and most courageous scholars have devoted their lives to the pursuit of an explanation for the virtually inherent animosity most white people appear to have toward people of color. Unlike her predecessors, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, a brilliant Washington, D.C. psychiatrist, has rejected conventional notions about the origin and perpetuation of racism. Dr. Welsing's theories, lectures, and scientific papers have provoked controversy for over 20 years. Now, the compilation of her work in the ISIS papers is destined to change the course of history. Written by LeGrand Clegg. Information taken from the ISIS papers, the keys to the colors. This is some of my notes that I took that I felt would be appropriate for what we did yesterday and for what we're doing today. The length of time required to neutralize global white supremacy will be inversely proportional to the level of understanding of the phenomenon. In other words, inversely proportional means it takes the same amount of time. It's inversely proportional. As a young child growing up in a home that was much aware of culture, Booker T. Coleman, of course, Jr., my father's from Tuskegee, Booker T. Coleman Sr., in growing up in a home, my mother worked for the National Urban League, which is like a partner to the NAACP, okay? Working for a sister by the name of Dr. Ann Tannehill. I grew up in a home that was always conscious. I was born 2 years before the murder of Emmett Till. I grew up during the civil rights movement. And so one of the advantages I think that I've had is I don't ever remember a time I wasn't like this. And if all of our children, if you told the children the truth, you see, I was told the truth from when I was, from what I could understand.
That's right.
And so I know the value because I lived it. I didn't have to go through a certain amount. And one of the reasons why I went to early childhood, I told you the story about Gary, Indiana, when I was teaching at Roosevelt High School, okay? Students were phenomenal, wonderful. They used to gather around my table when we had lunch, and we'd all have lunch together, as many as could fit those tables around. They used to arrange the tables. And then I would sit and we would talk about African history. I would talk about Malcolm X. I would talk about Egypt at the time. We didn't call it Kemet then. I would talk about the greatness of Africa. I talked about Africans in America. We talked about different things. But I realized that there was a lot of nonsense I had to erase from the chalkboards of their mind before I could write the truth. That's why I went to early childhood. Because in going to early childhood, I made it so that I was the one that wrote the first things on their mind.
Yes.
And it works because I get messages on Instagram and Facebook from my students that I had in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. I was in BJ's, which is like Costco. I don't know if you have BJ's out here.
We do.
You do? Okay. And I was in BJ's, and one of the managers used to be my student when she was in the first grade. And she said, I remember when you used to teach me Kiswahili. I used to teach the children Kiswahili. Jambo means hello. Kwaheri means goodbye. Bwana means mister. I taught them the numbers, moja and Billy, tatu. And here's this young lady, she got 2 children now in college.
Great.
And she's telling me she remembers Kiswahili.
Wonderful.
This works. My point is it works. Particularly when you get them young.
Of course.
When you get them young.
Yes.
And I know it because I lived it. I grew up in a home that was very my father was a member of the Mother AME Zion Church, whose pastor was, in fact, he married my parents in 1945, Reverend Dr. Benjamin Robeson, Paul Robeson's brother. Okay, so I grew up in a home listening to Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, or Billie Holiday, you know, Mama May Have and Papa May Have. My mother, every Sunday after church now, Roman Catholic, she'd say, Skip, sit here and listen to this song. Every Sunday, she'd say, Mama may have and Papa may have, but God bless the child that got its own. It was embedded in my head. Do your thing. That's right. And that's who we are. This is what Dr. Francis Cress Welsing is talking about. For as long as it takes you to come to understand white supremacy, a brother she has much respect for is a brother I quoted yesterday, Professor Neely Fuller. That's right. And he said, if you have a problem that you're trying to solve, and the cornerstone to your problem isn't white supremacy, you don't know what the problem is. It's embedded in Western culture, which now travels across the globe.
That's right.
Everything that you look at, you can go over there, you can look at what's going on in parts of the world, you can go back and you can see it's all about white supremacy. It's covered up with a whole bunch of other stuff, particularly religion. But when you get right down to it, it's white supremacy.
That's right.
People get upset, you know. They say, I'm a troublemaker. I say, I'm not a troublemaker. I'm telling the truth.
You're telling the truth.
And the truth make trouble.
Hey.
This is where we are right now as a people. But no matter what we do, we can fight your governor. I understand that. But the way in which I fight him, I got the curriculum to teach the children. That's how I fight. I take my energy into being a solutionaire. We already know them. We've been around them for over 400 years. Why are we still discussing who they are and not who we should be? Inversely proportional to the level of understanding of the phenomenon of white supremacy. The evolution of self and group respect, the will, determination, and discipline to practice the appropriate counter-racist behaviors on the part of the non-white victims of white supremacy. Everywhere that I study our history, from what brought down the dynastic system after the 6th dynasty in Kemet, to what brought down the Moors in 1492, to what started the problems on the plantations during the enslavement process, to the problems that started in the civil rights movement, to what's happening in hip-hop right today. Every time I study us, the problem is not them, the problem is we are fighting amongst ourselves.
It's sad.
We're fighting amongst ourselves. We're fighting right now about who created rap. In the civil rights movement, we were fighting about who was right. And the fact is, during the civil rights movement, they were both right. Balance. There's a time to be Malcolm. There's a time to be Martin.
Right.
And there's a time to be Nat Turner. You just got to pick your time and make it right. This is who we are as a people. But right now they've been able to confuse. The devil don't lie, the devil confuse. The devil give you 1/4 truth and 3/4 lie. You get so caught up in the 3/4, you get so caught up in the 1/4 lie, you don't see the 3/4 that is the 1/4 truth. You don't get caught up in the 3/4 lie. And when someone tells a perfect lie, the truth is unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what happened.
That's right.
And so my concept, for me, is a prophet is not a psychic. A prophet is just a good historian.
Thank you.
Because when you know what happened in the past, you can interpret what's happening in the present, and you can predict what's going to happen in the future. So when you predict something, this is going to happen, and it happens, everybody say, wow, Twilight Zone. No, I just know history.
Thank you.
Indo-Europeans have never been able to maintain a civilization more than 500 years. From when the Cambyses and the folk from Iran, from Persia, came into Kemet in 525 BC. And Africa was caught off guard because the Iron Age was coming in. And when the Iron Age came in, there was a different type of weapon. And that weapon was mastered amongst Indo-Europeans. And so things began to happen. And it's not that Africans didn't have iron. It's that they used iron for tools, not weapons. But see, when you are, your mindset is violent, everything around you, you make violent. And so Cambyses, the leader of the Persians in 525, goes in and he sacks the Kush-Kemetic dynasties, 525 BC. By 332, the Greeks are coming in. And they're not really Greeks. They're Macedonians. But that's beside the point. And they're not even really Macedonian. They're really Germanic people that came from the north and climbed down. That's really who they are. Okay. And they meet these Africans in the Mediterranean. And so what they do is they fight the Persians and win in 332. So 525, 332, that's how long the Persians lasted. Okay, that's a little over, 180 something years. 525 to 332, give or take. By 30 BC, here come the Romans, who have been impacted by the Etruscans, who were Africans in Sardinia and Corsica, and on the western coast of what we today call Italy. These another Germanic tribes come down and meet, and they start wars. They're called the Punic Wars, because they're fighting so-called Phoenicians. And so by 30 BC, they come in and they beat the Greeks. So the Greeks was only in power for a little over 300 and something years. Okay? And then the Romans have their empire, and they last until about 426 AD. They were really falling before that, but I'll give them 426 because they like to argue about that. But they still fell. And so if you 30 plus 426, you're dealing with basically 456 years. The Romans were in. And then after the Romans fell, the Roman Empire fell, Europe went into the Dark Ages. And it wasn't until the Moors came in 711 from North Africa, and came in and developed their civilization in Al-Andalusia. Okay? That lasted over 780 something years. 711 to 1492. That lasted longer than all the other ones before them. And then, of course, now we're going to fight amongst ourselves, and then the Moors are going to be brought down by the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile, Isabella and Ferdinand. Okay, going to be brought down. And that's going to start what we now call Western civilization. And this bad boy falling. This is the Oman Empire. This one is falling. And this is a little over 500 years. Not even 500 years if you consider 220 something years since 1777 or whatever you want to call it. They've never been able to maintain a civilization. And every civilization they ever had fell for the same exact reason. Perverts. Didn't know how to balance life. Didn't understand that when the people are happy, the civilization prospers. It's not when the choice few up here got it. Because what this is right now, this is sophisticated feudalism. You have to study the feudal system in Europe where you had the lords and the serfs. It was disorganized servitude. And this is what we're experiencing now. Here's a question. If you're paying more for the basic needs in life than you were before, your civilization is falling. It's falling. A civilization that is prosperous is getting better, not worse. And what happens is that the civilization itself turns upside down and falls because it's top heavy with a little bit of people. When less than 1% of the population owns 99 point something of the wealth, you're falling.
That's right. Done fell.
Okay? But my question to us, brothers and sisters, is what are we doing? How long will it take before we inversely, proportionately realize what we have to do, where we will bring our resources together? Where Imam Umar is able to have prosperous gatherings of people to come here to speak to us as to how to make things better. Not when you gotta wonder how much you can raise to bring the scholars in. If we're willing to give 10% tithe to the minister, nothing wrong with that. That's your business.
Right.
Are you willing to tithe for your knowledge and your wisdom? Are you willing to ensure that you tithe 10% to activities like this, whether something's going on or not? Tithe it so that it happens in the future, so that it comes back around. And so that nobody ever has to worry. How about our places of eating? You know, the clothes that I wear and I put up on Instagram, the great majority of them come out of black companies. Because I want people to be as proud to wear 3150 or athletics out of Atlanta. Okay? Brother has t-shirt. Brother, what's your t-shirt? Please talk to us. Man, yeah, man, I'm going to call you out. I'm sorry. I got to call you out. Okay?
This is a UNIA t-shirt, Marcus Garvey movement, connecting African kingdoms with black neighborhoods. So it's all about, like we talk about education, having our universities, resources. But yeah, I studied kinetic science too. So.
Okay. Do you sell the t-shirt, bro?
Actually, I never sold a t-shirt, but I can get with Brother Umar about it.
Everybody should have one of those t-shirts. That's why I brought you up, brother.
Yeah.
Everybody should have that t-shirt. And in Kwanzaa, everybody should get a little something, something. And you ought to make them for children, too. Make them children size so children can walk around with that.
That's right. That's right.
Okay? And if anybody else has business, the place, the island store, man, that food is good. I had to only eat half because I want to eat another half tonight. I don't want to get greedy. I want to enjoy 2 nights of that food. This is how we have to start to think.
That's right.
Ancient aura. Got jewelry. Phenomenal. Go online, check them out. Ancient aura, ankhs and all sorts of you know, everybody wanted to be dripping with all of the chains and everything like that. Okay, well if you want to drip ancient aura.
Right.
Black-owned company.
That's right.
Inversely proportional. These are the things that we can do right now. Okay? When a speaker come in with books and things, make it so they don't have to worry about if their luggage is going to be 50 pounds, because you got to pay a whole bunch of money if your luggage is over 50 pounds. Make it so that you buy everything they got. Make it so that the street vendor got to close down because they ain't got nothing else to sell. This is the way our mind should think.
That's the way it should be.
That's inversely proportional. That's what she meant by inversely proportional. This is how we can solve our issue. And this is real. This is not a make-believe story here. This is something that can happen. Even if you're on public assistance, put $20 of that public assistance away and support black business. They gave me hell the last 7 years of my career because I spent big bucks with black folk. And I'm not going to say I was unapologetic, nor was I unashamed. Because I had nothing to be ashamed of, and I got nothing to apologize for. I did what everybody else is doing. I'm just bold enough to do it. Ain't nobody looking out for us. We know that. You ain't never seen a soul food restaurant in a Chinese neighborhood. It's not that they would not go. So it's not like they're angry. It's not like they would start trouble. I'm not trying to raise that issue. I'm saying you're not going to see things in other neighborhoods that we see in ours. It's just the way it is. And I don't blame them. You should support your own. Just like I proudly support my own. And I don't care what people think. Inversely proportional. Group and self-respect. That you wear the clothing of your people. By your people, for your people.
That's right.
Put some money away. Find those vendors. Spend your money there. Start eating in restaurants where the people have the kind of food that your enzymes can break down. And not the kind of hour later you're still hungry. Because Dr. Sebi will teach you. I've been going to Dr. Sebi since 1988. Because when that brother was exonerated from being attacked, I said, I got to know that brother. So when I read in the Amsterdam News, a black newspaper in New York, that he had been exonerated, that was the Wednesday, October 1st. October 4th, 1988, I was sitting up in his Usha Herbal Institute talking to Dr. Sebi because I needed to figure out what this man had done to get away with what this system tried to attack him for. And then I began to realize he said one thing: all disease comes from an accumulation of mucus.
That's right. Mucus.
And what you do in order to get rid of that is that you bring oxygen to your cells. And when you bring oxygen to your cells, it then allows your cells to breathe. And when you eat acidic foods, it suffocates your cells. So when you go out and you buy foods that are not food, what it does is that it suffocates your cell. So after an hour of eating all that food, you're still hungry because you never satiated the problem that you had in the first place, because your cells are still hungry for oxygen. That's why you drink water, because water got oxygen, H2O. You eat green plants because they give off oxygen. And you'll find that if you drink water a half hour before you eat, and make sure you eat some kind of green thing in your meal, you'll see that you don't eat that much because your body is no longer hungry for the oxygen it needs to breathe. It's very simple. Nature is not cruel. It tells you the truth. Inversely proportional. We have to turn inwards and figure out how it is that we have gotten to this situation when we as the adults taught the children, and now the children are running the house. How could it be when we locked up the insane asylum and now the patients are running the insane asylum?
That's it.
How did that happen? How did they take away our cloak? How did they take away the fact that we were the doctors in the insane asylum? Trying to figure this out. The most critical factor in that change of circumstances will be non-white people's, melanated people's, ever-increasing understanding of the behavioral phenomenon of white supremacy as a global terroristic power system.
There you go.
It's a terroristic system.
Yes, it is.
It terrorizes you every day that you wake up. And it terrorizes you by matter of degree. By matter of degree. It doesn't come all at you physically. First they try to buy you out. If they can't buy you out, then they'll start to put you down, make the people turn against you. And if they can't do that, then they get somebody within your group to kill you. But once as a group we understand something, it changes the dynamic. The local and global power system structured and maintained by a person who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined, this system consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation. Think about what we experience every day. When we go out, when we wake up and we leave our home. This is why our house has to be decorated with us. Our children have to see pictures of children that look like them. Okay? Symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response is conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity. And again, I put the rel, cell, wep, and I add the H. Much respect, because my brother does mention health, but I think it should be a particular section. Religion, economics, labor, he calls it sex, I call it gender issues. Education, law, war or security, entertainment, politics, and health, in those areas. The ultimate purpose of the system is to prevent white genetic annihilation on Earth, a planet in which the overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white by white-skinned people. All of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetically recessive white-skinned people. Okay, it's called Punnett Square, where you got the big B and the little b. This is science. Big B is dominant, little b is recessive. Okay? Everything that leans towards the dominant is always melanin based. And as you go to the little b, it becomes melanin recessive. It should be noted, in the majority of instances, any neurotic drive for superiority usually is founded upon a deep and pervading sense of inadequacy and inferiority. In other words, whenever anybody is trying to prove themselves superior to you, it's because they feel inferior. Because if you were superior, you would just be superior. You wouldn't have to tell people. You wouldn't have to force people. You would just be who you are.
Right.
Because your manner would prove you are. It's just the way it is. Children come to me and they say, Brother Kaba, why do I have to know this? Why do I have to know ancient history? And I tell them about the slingshot. You have a slingshot. And what is the purpose of the slingshot? To project something. Where? In front. Okay? And the further back you pull the projectile, Shabaka stone, I take you back before the beginning began. I take you back before existence existed, to attempt to figure out exactly what was in place at that particular time and how to develop an understanding of that. This absence of color always acts, whiteness is indeed a genetic inadequacy or a relative genetic deficiency state based upon the genetic inability to produce the skin pigments of melanin. This absence of color acts always as a genetic recessive to the dominant genetic factor of color production. Color always annihilates, phenotypically and genetically speaking, the non-color white. Black people possess the greatest color potential, with brown, red, and yellow peoples possessing lesser quantities respectively. This is the genetic and psychological basis for the Crest theory of color confrontation and racism, also known as white supremacy. A defense mechanism was reaction formation A response that converts on a psychological level something desired and envied, but wholly unattainable, into something discredited and despised. So when you wonder why everything that's black is bad and everything that's white is good, it comes out of what is called the reaction formation in the brain, which is in your brain stem. It is also known as that part of the brain that's known as the R complex or the reptilian complex that goes into a fight or flight concept. It's always trying to protect the organism at all costs. And in so doing, when they see something that they cannot attain, will never attain, the first thing they'll tell you, oh, that ain't no good anyway. That's ugly. Okay, that's what they'll tell you. Because they want you to feel that. They want you to believe that you are the one that's inadequate, as opposed to their viewing of your pigmentation. This is just the science to understand what we're experiencing as a people. Okay, oh, that's bad hair. I'm finishing up my next book on melanin. It's called Carbon Before Melanin, because Dr. Sebi used to always say to me, Booker T, you're always talking about melanin. But before melanin, it was carbon. Okay, I got a whole chapter dedicated to Dr. Sebi on carbon, to help us understand what carbon is, then to understand how melanin would be formed out of that. And there's a chapter I have on your reaction formation, okay? And what happens as a people in the reaction formation as it relates to when it's melanated. It's located in your brain stem, and you have 12 pigmented sites in your brain stem. This is what Dr. Richard King talks about. And in your brain stem, when you are observing something, you know, your brain looks like a mushroom. You have the brain stem, and then out of the brain stem grows what's called the limbic system, and then out of the limbic system you have what's called the neocortex, the big part of the brain, okay? The oldest part of your brain is your R complex, your brain stem. Then out of the brainstem flourished your limbic system, and then out of that came your neocortex. Your brainstem is responsible for the protection of the organism. Your limbic system is where you feel things, your emotions. And your neocortex is where you think. Okay? And while it's the biggest, it's the youngest. For instance, there are times that messages cannot be sent to think about. Okay? Your R complex says, yo, no. You just put your hand on the stove. We ain't got time to think about that. And I ain't got time to feel it. The reflex. Okay? There are times you step out in the street, a car come by, you jump back, okay? You ain't got time to think about this car coming at you. So your R complex protects you, okay, at all costs. And when people of European descent look at your melanated state, that's right. Okay, and after they jump back, they'll make you think that you got the problem. Okay, all the time. Okay, like politicians, when that congresswoman, not gonna mention no names, came upon a brother who's a congressman. She got all that mouth. She cussing out that young boy, doing all sorts of things, following him, harassing him before she was a congresswoman. She got all this mouth. All of a sudden, she come up against his brother who's a congressman. Now all of a sudden, he scares me. He frightens me. Because her reaction formation, when he came at her, she realized, you ain't playing with me. You ain't gonna do that to me. So what she did, she jumped in her bag. She jumped into Europeans' bag of he frightens me. Because the next thing she's going to say is, he raped me.
I believe.
That's part of the reaction formation. Because she fantasizes on him what she wish could happen. This is part of the reaction formation.
Okay.
And that's why they discredit you. That's why everything that is black is bad and everything that's white is good. Because they know they can't have it. So since it's like that, then it's bad. Them lips are ugly. Them big, thick lips are ugly. And then they make an appointment to go to the doctor to take fat from their butt and put it in their lips. They say that complexion, that black, that's ugly. And then in December, in the wintertime, they're going to lay up in this thing, look like a coffin in a suntan parlor to look like you and at the same time tell you how ugly it is. They risk their life to look like you while they're telling you everything about you is wrong. That is insanity.
It is insanity.
It borders on psychopathy, psychopathy. They're psychopaths. Another example of the reaction formation defense is the elaboration of the myth of white genetic superiority. Acutely aware of their inferior genetic ability to produce skin color, whites built the elaborate myth of white genetic superiority. Furthermore, whites set about the huge task of evolving a social, political, and economic structure that would support the myth of the inferiority of blacks and other non-whites. And if somebody can get you, if somebody can create an illusion and get you to believe that illusion, while it is an illusion, it becomes your reality. So now we're running around doing all the things they say that we do because we've bought into their myth. And then when we do it, they highlight that person so young people can say, you see, I told you. I told you that's what you were. But they set it up that way. An additional psychological defense maneuver utilized by whites, and this is all coming out of the ISIS papers, by the way. These are just my notes that I took. An additional psychological defense maneuver utilized by whites has been that of projection. Feeling extreme hostility and hate towards non-whites, whites began the pattern of stating that non-whites hated them. Listen to them now. They're now saying that we're really in trouble now. They don't like us. They're starting trouble with us. When in reality, they are projecting how they feel towards us.
That's right. That's right.
See, we know this. We see this. But what are we doing about this? This mechanism has served to mitigate the guilt whites occasionally experience for their impulse to aggress against blacks and other people of color. Okay, we have situations in our community, okay, drive-bys. We do things that are not really very nice, not very good for the community, for the life of the community. We threaten each other, we steal from each other, not good. But we're not the type of people that will pull a fire alarm and then shoot the students as they leave the school.
Wow. My Jesus.
We're not the type of people that will roll up as a group, will roll up in a dollar store, as they did here in Jacksonville. We're not the type of people that will roll up in a church after being invited to participate in a spiritual event and then shoot up the church. We're not the type of people in Buffalo that go into a supermarket and shoot up the supermarket. But you know what all of those tell us? I ain't never seen you roll up in South Side of Chicago amongst the Bloods or the Crips. I see you going into churches, supermarkets, dollar stores, places that you know people are going to live.
There you go.
But roll up in the neighborhood where folk are packing. If you that bad, roll up South Side Chicago. Come on into South Bronx. Up on 3rd Avenue and 168th Street where I used to teach. Come on into South Central Los Angeles. Okay? If you that bad, go ahead and do that. Cowards.
They are.
Yeah, we're reading about you.
Always have.
That's right, we'll be reading about you. If Jet Magazine was out, you'd be in Picked Up the Week.
Right now.
But this is what we're dealing with right now. And when they do that, all of a sudden, guy shoots up and just kills people. And now they want to do a psychological profile on him. But when the brother gets into a situation, all of a sudden he's an animal, he's a savage. But when y'all do this in just these numbers, all of a sudden now everybody wants to just psychoanalyze you. Or he grew up with problems. Every black person is born into a problem. But nobody want to have mercy on us. Projection. That's what this is. The destructive... Say again, bro?
That situation you just said.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is that when they do something like that, that person don't project on their whole race?
Oh, yeah.
When we do it,
That's right.
it's kind of our whole race.
And it's called synecdoche. Okay, that's what you're talking about, synecdoche. I'm going to spell it for you because I couldn't find it in a regular dictionary. I had to go to Barnes & Noble and get that dictionary that's like about 20,000 pages and look up synecdoche. S-Y-N-E-C-H-E-D-O-C-H-E. Synecdoche. Synecdoche is when the part represents the whole. Okay? So that when a brother or a sister does something that is not in the best interest of the community, all of a sudden everybody want to know, in other words, that's the whole group. Okay? When President Barack Obama became president, he became a symbol for the whole group. He's a symbol. Okay? When, and great, however you want to look, not going to judge, he became president, but black folks still was in trouble. And his ascending to that position did not do anything really for the brothers and sisters I know on 125th Street between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Boulevard. Okay? A symbol. When we had our sister Ketanji Brown Jackson become a Supreme Court justice, phenomenal. All praise is due. Symbol. Didn't do nothing for black folk. It's a symbol. And Malcolm said, stop giving us symbols.
There you go.
And start doing something. It's called symbolique. Symbol is what it represents. Symbolique is the fabric that brought it into existence to become the symbol in the first place. I was talking to people, something happened, I forget what it was, and they asked me how I felt about it. Because it reflects. I said, well, how you feel about Jeffrey Dahmer? Are you a cannibal? You hear silence? Here? That's what happened there. We ain't had no more to say. Projection. When they do horrible things, it's a psychological thing. He had a rough life. We've had an intergenerational rough life. Unfortunately, epigenetically, we have had a tag that's been brought on each and every one of us, the baton of being enslaved, and still is there in its own way.
Yeah.
Family, we got work to do. The destructive and aggressive behavioral patterns being displayed by white people towards all non-white peoples is evidence of the inner hate, hostility, and rejection they feel towards themselves.
That's right.
I never taught children, and I always corrected children when they said, why do they hate us? They don't hate you. They fear you. They fear you. And out of that fear comes the response from the reaction formation of what is called hate. But they really hate themselves. But through projection, they will hate you because they don't have the courage to hate themselves. Because then they'd have to admit something, that they are recessive and their time is up.
Every time is up.
And of the, I'll read it again. The destructive and aggressive behavioral patterns being displayed by white people towards all non-white peoples is evidence of the inner hate, hostility, and rejection they feel towards themselves, and of the depth of self-alienation, which is the Ice Age mentality that has evolved from the genetic and psychological kernel of color inadequacy. Inadequacy, inferiority, complex. I've always believed that what Dr. King said was correct. It's not the color of your skin, it's the content of your character.
That's true.
I've always believed that. I've always felt that. The spirit in all of us is as active in all of us. The problem is, some folks' spirit is in the storage room of their brains. And they don't feel that towards people. You know when you're looking for something that you put in a storage room and it's way in the back and there's a whole bunch of stuff on top of it? That's where humanity rests with them. It's in the back of their storage room, covered by so much ice and frozen. It's hard for them. They're trying to thaw it out, because that's by nature, they're trying to thaw it out. But it's still cold. It's still cold. I know for a fact, you see, this is Dr. Edward Scobie, another great scholar, brilliant scholar from Dominica. He used to always say, Booker T, don't tell me nothing about no good white people. Because good white people act as shields for the bad ones. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad used to talk about those thousands of wolves that are outside your door. There's 100 wolves that would put their life on the line to protect you. As you look out your window, they all look alike. So you don't know where those 100 are. Are you ready to go outside? Well, if you do, you better be prepared. Because those 100 could be way in the back, because the 900, no, we ain't let you up here. But they all look alike. So we face something as a people. We face the task of understanding that there is good and bad in all people.
That's true.
And once you can get to that point, you free yourself of certain concepts.
True.
I know that there are good white people. I don't have time to look for you. And I'm not going to spend the time looking for you. Because if you're doing what you're supposed to do, you need to be in your neighborhood and talk to them old crazy people out there. Get them together. Okay, I'll do what I got to do in my community. You do what you got to do in your community. If you really want to help, there's nothing you can do for me. What you can do for me is you can talk to your crazy uncle. Okay, Chauvin. Okay, because when he was in Thanksgiving dinner, he was telling everybody how he loved to put his knee in black people's neck. And you used to go to your grandmother, his mother, and say, Grandma, Uncle Derek is over there talking about putting his knee in black people's neck. And Grandma said, no, he's only just saying that. He don't mean that. And the next thing you know, you got George Floyd. So that when the woman of European descent comes to me and speaks of the situation and how much we have in common, I have to remind her, we have very little in common because you're the one that brought that beast into existence. What kind of mother were you that you could raise such a beast that would grow to despise you? What type of mother were you? Because you know black mothers don't take that. Black mothers don't play. Okay? They'll let you know.
Yeah.
And so as we move forward, family, and we understand what we're facing, we have to understand that inverse proportion. For everything that they put to you, what are you inversely pushing back? What are we doing to push that back?
Good question.
Because the reason why so many of us find ourselves in the situation, I'm speaking of those that stand up there and got a whole bunch to say. The reason why we're in trouble a lot is because we don't have the community as a whole behind us.
That's true.
Okay? We have phenomenal people that support us. But we need the whole, as she says. In the presence of melanin, in the presence of color, whites will feel genetically inferior. Have you ever gone on the elevator and everybody stops talking? Okay, you know why they do that? Part of it is because, you know, you've gotten on and they hold back. But you have to understand that melanin captures light. When you go in the elevator and there's only one light up in there, you absorb it all and you take it from them. While they were in that elevator by themselves, they all shared that light. When you walked in, you captured and absorbed it. And ain't nobody shining on them after that. That's science, by the way. You absorb, you capture and absorb light.
Wow. Never thought of it like that.
And so their reaction to you, yes, because you're black and you get on. And then they got something to say to you because now they're going to try to make you feel inadequate. Because they know that they have become so inadequate and inferior in the elevator, they're going to have to make you feel worse for yourself so that you can't recognize the fact that they have a problem. Next time you get on an elevator and that happens, or you walk into a room and everybody gets quiet. You know, there was a time in my career when I was working, there was a brother that was a principal. There was another brother that spoke multiple languages. And he was into chemistry, he taught science, and the principal would always get me and him to go into the principal's meetings, right, that could bring. And when we would walk in, that whole room would shut down. And I told him the story that I told you, and, you know, like they said, you know, I never thought about it like that, and then he said, after he figured this out, the principal, after he figured this out, he said, come on, let's go have some fun. And he would find places for us to go where we'd be only black people in the room. And he said, you know, you're right. I never thought of it like that. But you see, even we don't. Because when we get in and everybody shuts down, we get very defensive. We think there's something wrong with us. But there's nothing wrong with you. Everything is right with you.
Praise God.
That's the problem.
Praise God.
It's the inadequacy that they feel in your presence. You know, sisters, brothers too, but sisters had to get a law called the Crown Act so that y'all could have dreads and braids, because when they see braids or they see dreadlocks, they know you have rejected them. And that you are proud to be who you are. You are proud to bask in your beauty.
That's right. That's right.
Okay? And have you ever wondered why when sisters do not, or brothers too, but sisters in particular, when you don't straighten your hair, all of a sudden now they call it natural?
Yes. They call it natural.
Oh, she going natural. But family, explain this to me. Because aren't they natural? They didn't do nothing to their hair. So aren't they natural too? Why is it when sisters? Because when you let your hair be your hair, you return back to your original self. And that scares the living heaven out of them. Think about what I'm saying, family.
Yes, yes, yes.
Think about this. Just for a while, because you know, I always tell people, I'm not here to make you believe me. I'm simply here to make you think. And if I can make you think, I'm successful. People, you know, they have a lot to say about what I say. And I say, but that's wonderful. And they're looking at me like, why is that wonderful? I just said I don't believe anything you say. But I don't want you to believe me. And the fact that you don't believe me, I made you think. So I've been successful. As folk that go around and speak to the community, we sometimes take it offensive if what I'm saying you don't accept. I've learned being around middle school children, you're not always going to be accepted. So don't get used to it. You know, we pump up our ego when people agree with us. That has its place. But I'm also willing for you not to believe me. I just want to make you think. And as a community, we have to start to think. And I have to present this information in a way that allows you to think as freely as you want to think, without me trying to color. When I come in with a coloring book that hasn't been colored. And I let each and every one of you, with the coloring book, color it the way you want it to look. And not the way I tell you, this should be red, this should be green. If you want a red tree, draw a red tree. Okay? If you want a purple sky, draw a purple sky. Because that's how you view what it is. In the presence of color, whites feel genetically inferior. They, the non-melanated people, try to compensate for their color inadequacy by placing themselves in a socially superior position, which is what they do when they're with, you know, when you're at work and immediately they have to say something to you that attempts to belittle you. The reason why they're doing that is because they feel inadequate in your presence. And so in order for them to be able to feel better, they have to put their knee on your neck. This is how they do what they do. And you see, if you're in a position where your job hangs in the limb and you cannot respond the way you'd like to respond, I like to get sarcastic with them. Because I know they're not going to read through what I'm saying, because they don't have the intellect to be able to read. So I start saying things that only a few people in the room can understand, particularly the other black folk in the room. And that's how I get back. And then normally, I normally can get a black person to laugh. And when that happens, they're very upset. Okay? That's the psychology of what we have done as black people.
Wow.
Okay? Sometimes you got to bend principles. You never break them, but you can bend them. And I know that some of our jobs hang by the fact we have to sit there and take that nonsense from them. It's just the way it is. If you want to pay your rent, put food on the table, protect your wife, your babies, your husband, your significant other, whoever it may be, there are certain things that we have had to go through because of their inadequacy. Black people don't have a problem. White people got a problem. Black people problem is that white people have a problem.
With us.
And that's what we have to deal with. This has been our piece. But whether they realize it or not, what don't kill you make you stronger.
Sure.
And they have built us real strong and real resilient. And they've made us into super sapiens, as they have remained superficial sapiens. This inadequacy is apparent in their drive to divide the vast majority of non-whites into fractional as well as frictional minorities. Now they even have the nerve to talk about majority minorities.
True.
Now, isn't that some insanity? That's really insane.
That's really crazy.
And they look at you with a straight face and say that. But when we understand that be you from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Haiti, whether you're from the south side of Chicago, whether you're a brother or sister in UK, whether you're Ghanaian or Nigerian, you all belong to the same family,
Right.
then you got 100 people against 10. What you going to do? Nebu Africa. Nebu Africa. Word given to me by Baba Heru from the Shrine of Ptah. Nebu Africa. Neb is the concept of all. See, Pan-African is a Roman term. Pan means all. I like the African. Neb or Nebu. U is a plural. When you add U to a word, it becomes plural. Like we add S, becomes plural. In Medu neter, you add a U, it becomes plural. Nebu means all. All. Not just all people. All of nature. All of the cosmos. Af is flesh. It's the material. Ra is the light, heat, and sound energy, the spirit. And Ka, the nature of the spirit. Afra Ka is the flesh of the light, heat, and sound energy of the spirit. Be you Jamaican, Puerto Rican, Mexicano, Guatemalan, South Side of Chicago, Bronx, New York, Newark, New Jersey, Jacksonville, Florida, or Jackson, Mississippi. We're all one people.
Amen.
Why are we fighting amongst ourselves? Because we have different language groups. Kiswahili should become the practical language spoken amongst black people, African people worldwide. It is the largest African language spoken. It is adapted by the UN as a universal language. It's being adapted by African nations as a spoken language in Africa. And it is at the base of all languages as it relates to Kikongo, Kiswahili, and the Niger-Congo languages. It's being adapted. So if I go to Brazil and my brothers and sisters speak Portuguese, I speak English, we should speak Kiswahili to each other. If I go to Puerto Rico, brothers and sisters speak Spanish, I speak English, we should speak Kiswahili to each other. If I go to Holland and my brothers and sisters speak Dutch and I speak English, we should speak Kiswahili. If I go to Ghana, we speak Kiswahili. It's the unifying practical language. All African languages are phenomenal. Yoruba, Twi from Ghana, they're all great. But Kiswahili has the foundations of a language that is being adapted. Well, look, we're going to do Kwanzaa. That's Kiswahili. It's already been embraced by so many different people around the world. So we should be able to speak to each other. And so our inability to speak Spanish to our brothers and sisters, or French to my brothers and sisters in Haiti, or Dutch to Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao, creates a situation that there's a blockage. But you see, Spanish is your language like English is mine. Because there was a time we weren't speaking those languages. These are the languages of those who would wish to oppress us. So, they fractional and frictional. Fractional, they break us up. Frictional, they make us fight each other. We have to stop. Everywhere, like I say, everywhere that I find our history, they were able to overcome us because they took advantage of the fact that we were fighting amongst ourselves. We must stop fighting amongst ourselves.
So what about that Jackson, Mississippi thing with the 2 separate courts and 2 separate polices?
I don't blame him. I would do the same thing if I saw black folk. Chokwe Lumumba, his father.
90% black. Jackson, Mississippi is 90% black.
That's more of a reason. I would do it too. If I were them, I would do that. Now, please understand what I mean when I say that. My mother used to always say, you got to think like your enemy. So you got to think like them. You cannot let them have their own security force.
True that.
You can't. Somehow you got to and the thing is that they see their time is up. Because that will only last a little while. Chokwe Lumumba, his father, the mayor, the first one, we honored him in New York. And I was speaking about William Leo Hansberry. And he looked at my name. At the time, I hadn't corrected my name. He said, oh, that was my slave name. I said, what's up with that? His name was Chokwe Lumumba at the time. But his name was Taliaferro. Like, that was my middle name, Taliaferro. That's what the T stands for. Chokwe Lumumba was a dynamic lawyer. He was honored by Alton Maddox. And we had a celebration for him. And we were part of it. Jackson, Mississippi, that place is bad, boy. Them black folk is something else there. And they can't let that happen. I'm surprised it took so long for them to want to do that. See, we don't, and again, I don't know if we understand how great we are.
It's true, we don't.
We really don't.
We don't.
Because if we did, we would act differently. That's how I know. By how we act.
That's true.
We fundamentally don't understand how great we are, what we have achieved. And I'm talking about the brother or the sister who is an office worker, FedEx. I'm talking about those that would be considered to be not so much. If you're black and alive in 2023, you're a miracle.
Amen.
We don't see that though, because we've been put upon for so long psychologically. We don't see the threat that we offer them. In Jackson, Mississippi, I'm not surprised that they did that. If I were them, I would have done it sooner. In fact, I wouldn't even let it happen. That's why they're regentrifying. This is why they are changing up all of the voting areas. You know, that they're just, and they're blatant about it.
Yes, they are.
They're right up in your face telling you. And you see, this is why, with due respect to Martin Luther King and civil rights, Malcolm was a little bit more correct.
Yes.
Yes.
With human rights. Because when you get human rights, civil rights follows. But if you get civil rights and not human rights, they can take that back. Because it's all about man-made laws by them.
By them.
Okay? So when they vote you, you know, people are fighting for the Voting Rights Amendment. I'm not fighting for the Voting Rights Amendment. I'm fighting for rewriting the Constitution.
Thank you.
Because when that Constitution was written, there was a bunch of old white men that enslaved Africans, enslaved the Native American peoples, and had no respect for their women because they couldn't vote. We need a new, and then they say, but that's the Constitution. Well, you know how many times the Bible has been revised? If you can revise the Word of God, you certainly can revise the word of some old white people, some old pale faces, pedophiles, enslavers.
True that.
I ain't about voting rights. The fact that I need a law to give me right to vote tells me they can take it back.
Yeah, that's true.
If you give me human rights and if you write me into the Constitution, you can't take my rights from me. Martin Luther King had his point, but that's down the road. After they start looking at you as a human being, then you can talk about the law. But until they look at you as a human being, they can take back anything that they want to give you.
That's true.
So I'm not surprised at Jackson.
That's the way they say it.
Because them brothers and sisters, they brought me down there for Kwanzaa one time. I saw some stuff going on there. Them brothers and sisters are tight down there. They are doing good things.
Praise God.
And you see, that's the other thing. You know, later on today, I'm going to go over to the dollar store. And I want to do a visual. Because everywhere I go, I always try to bring to the community where I am. And I couldn't come to Jacksonville without honoring those brothers and sisters that were murdered at the dollar store. Okay? Gerald Galleon, Angela Carr, and A.J. Laguerre Jr. Okay? Because I want the community to see. And the same way I come here and tell you the great things that are happening, see, we need to understand there's some really great things. And one of the advantages of traveling, as Heru and I do, to various places, we see some really great things. And sometimes when you're watching the news and you see everything wrong, sometimes you can get caught up in that. But when you understand there are people that are doing great things, like even now as we live stream this to the community and maybe even the world, they see us here doing this thing, talking this way. This is celebratory here.
That's right.
And it's important that our people see this. It's important that our children see this. We are in a better position today than we've ever been before.
That's right. That's right.
And the reason why they come at us the way they do is because of that. Kwame Ture once told us, the closer you get to the Creator, the closer the devil will get to you. When you start really accomplishing stuff, that's when they're going to come after you. When you're voting governance, and you see, here's another thing about politics. I may have said this, but folk may not have heard this, some folk who may not have been here yesterday. We are a people who love.
Amen to that.
Amongst Africans, the highest form of the word that I have found is mer. M-E-R, mer. Mer is higher than agape. Mer is a spiritual, physical, mental, soulful love. A love that encompasses you and makes you part of nature. That helps you understand how divine you are. And in understanding your divinity, you see the divine in other people. You see divine in the Creator's creations. You know, you see that. And you feel it, okay? And that's what built the pyramids. But that's also what put us on the plantations. Because the wrong people came amongst us. And we tried to give that same love. That unconditional, phenomenal, dynasty-building love.
They took advantage of it.
And they just didn't have that kind of love. They came from the ice. They knew nothing. You know, they singing with Tina. Well, what love got to do with this? And this is what we've been exposed to. And the reality of it is that we as a people looking at this understand what it is that we have to do. But there's something that's stopping us. And I say it's a mental thing. What stops us from giving us the financial support needed is a mental thing. For us to fight each other, it's a mental thing. We've been through this over 400 years. We know the answer. We've solved the problem in the past a number of times, yet we always revert back. In the movie Django Unchained, there's a scene played by Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
And he's at the table talking about that part of the brain that enslaves somebody. Well, that actually exists. It's called the amygdala. That is where your emotions are set. That is where they can enslave you. But there's another part of your brain called the hippocampus, which is where your long-term memory is. And so in your long-term memory, when you can draw you see, AI to me, AI, people say artificial intelligence. Heru and I have decided that we're going to call it ancestral intelligence. When you tap into the ancestors, okay? And you are able to understand things that go beyond just that regular okie doke that people are giving to you. Okay? And that you can see through it. You know? It's the same thing you're looking at, but you're looking deeper. Okay? Like James Brown said, I like James Brown. I quoted him yesterday too. He said, I want to get down, but in order for me to get down, I got to get in deep. Okay? When I get down, I have to get in deep. Okay? We have to get in deep as a black folk. And as we're viewing this, we have to wonder what it is that stops us. And I think it's settled in our amygdala in our brain. That every time we feel success, we hit the imposter syndrome. That we believe we don't deserve this. Because we're enslaved. We are not like them. They got it going on. They'll always have it going on. But in our long-term memory, we have it when we were getting it on.
That's right. That's right.
And the further back I can take you, the further in the future I can project you.
That's right. Again.
And it's important that when we go back, we realize the reason why we're going back is to go forward. So when the children are saying, well, what is this going to do for me? Well, if I can take you back, then you can have a great future.
That's right. That's right.
And the further back you go, the better the future you'll have.
That's right.
Because when you know how it happened back then, you can understand how it's happening right now, and you can project into the future. This is why, in terms of your question, I'm going to tell you, that ain't going to work. And you can change all of the voting that you want. That's not going to work. You can come all up in our neighborhood. You know, my brother was saying that when he was back here in the day, there was neighborhoods out here that wasn't no white people out here. It was black. Okay? On 125th Street, I see white people pushing their baby in a stroller and walking their dog. You know they feel comfortable in 125th Street.
That's right.
You know why? Well, let's continue, because you're going to figure out why they're coming back into our neighborhoods. Whites are genetically weaker than blacks. Now, here's where I'm getting into my own research now. This comes from Fox News. Okay? This is Fox News. You know what I'm saying? Fox News.
Exactly what you're saying.
Whites genetically weaker than blacks. This is their study. This is breaking news. You know, they go, dun, 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 dun. That's what this just happened. White Americans are both genetically recessive and less diverse than their black compatriots. Now we their compatriots. Because now they're beginning to realize something. A Cornell University-led study finds. This happened in Cornell University. Analyzing genetic makeup of 20 Americans of European ancestry and 15 African Americans, researchers found that the former, European, showed much less variation among 10,000 tested genes than did the latter, African Americans, which was expected. Right there, they tell you something linguistically. If you read it and gloss over it, you'll miss it. They expected this. They knew this before they wrote this article. They also found that Europeans had many more possibly harmful mutations than did African, which was a surprise.
Really?
The Cornell study published in the journal, see, because now I want to give you the science of it in case people say, well, where'd you get that from? Published in the journal Nature Thursday, indicates that Europeans went through a second population bottleneck probably about 30,000 years ago, when the ancestral population was again reduced to relatively few in number during the Ice Age. This is what they're saying now.
That's right.
This is why I'm telling you, they ain't got long to be here now. Because the bottleneck is happening right now. The birthplace of the human family, a Stanford University team found deep traces of long-ago population movements, all originating from a ground zero in Ethiopia, Kenya, or Tanzania. I would add Central and Southern Africa. For example, the Twa Mbuti, derogatorily called pygmies, of the Congo forest were found to be quite close to the Bushmen of Namibia in southern Africa. There's a connection between Central and Southern Africa as the first human family, the Twa people. Okay? But both were very different from most other sub-Saharan groups, because the other sub-Saharan groups came from them. The Kush, the Kemet, West Africa, okay, came from the Twa Mbuti people. The Twa Mbuti, the Khoisan, are the base of the tree of which the branches of African people came out, and then the twigs were the Indo-Europeans. Think of it like a tree. Wild. Europe faces a serious problem. Without a major shift in the current fertility trends, industrialized Europe will see its native population decline by about 3/4 over the 21st century. Family, listen to what I'm saying here. This is the research that they're doing. And I'm going to give you some books to read, if by chance. Their numbers are dwindling because of fertility. Melanin in the reproductive organs. Okay, this is my research. Melanin in the reproductive system of the human being. In the female woman, the egg is magnetic. In the tail of the spermatozoon of the man, the tail, known as microtubulus, is electric. Okay? When a black man and a black woman mate, she has magnetism that draws the sperm to her. He has electricity that swims to the egg. So you have the dynamism of science, electromagnetism.
All right now.
See, we're going back to science now. In the recessive human, there is a lack of magnetism in the egg and a lack of electricity in the spermatozoon. So therefore, there's a difficulty in the spermatozoon, singular for spermatozoa, plural, getting to the egg. When the African who had depigmented themselves came out of the Ice Age, the first thing they should have done was to find the blackest person that they could mate with to return back onto the dominant strain of the human family. But instead, in their calcified pineal gland, they decided that they were going to only mate amongst themselves. So family, the people we're dealing with are not mutations. They're mutations of mutations. And they further push themselves away from the strain of life. They push themselves away through choice. Auto-genocide. This is science, family. There's a gorilla, used to live, passed away. Name was Snowflake in Spain. It was an albino gorilla. Okay? Snowflake would not mate with other albino females, although there were so few of them. He was a white gorilla. Refused to mate. You can Google it, by the way. Google Snowflake, gorilla in Spain. You'll see. Wouldn't mate with albino gorilla, only mate with black female gorillas. He had a whole bunch of children, whole bunch of grandchildren. He died of skin cancer. He died of melanoma because he was white.
Okay.
That's another reason why they're dying off. Melanoma. See, we don't know this because when we go to the doctor for our checkup, we go through something. But when white people go to the doctor, they got to get naked. And the doctor takes a magnifying glass and go over their whole body to find melanomas, skin cancers. President Biden has already had 2 removed. His wife had 1 removed. Bill Clinton has had them removed. Jimmy Carter has had them removed. We only know because they're presidents and so they report them. But white people in general have melanomas removed from their body quite frequently.
That's right. Okay.
No civilization has ever recovered from such a population decline, and never before has such a decline been entirely voluntary. They did this themselves. They worked themselves off the chain of humanity on their own through the fear of a black planet.
Sit down.
Family, we don't know how great we are. But we got to get ready, because even if all this happens, what's going to happen to us? Do we have an economic system? Do we have an education system? Do we have a way of hiring our own people? Do we have a way of governing? I understand, no, I ain't going to vote. You have to govern yourself. How are you going to govern yourself? Okay? So you don't want to vote. See, we're in this thing with love. Oh, they don't like us. No, politicians don't like you. In fact, they don't respect you. And I told politicians myself, I don't like you. And I'm not voting for you because I like you. I'm voting for you because you're going to give me reparations.
Okay.
Some politicians, I say, how do you feel about reparations? Along with other topics that I want to know about, but I'm singular on reparations. How do you feel about reparations? Well, I haven't contemplated exactly how we're going to approach it. I say, well, when you figure it out, come back and ask me for my vote. Until then, you ain't got it. And just because you black don't mean I'm going to vote for you.
Thank you.
Because you could be the worst kind of agent out there.
Hello.
Okay, here's the same article. It comes from the New York Times, where white deaths exceed births.
Wow.
States in blue had more whites dying than being born in 2016.
Wow.
I'm just saying.
You were saying.
I'm not happy. Might be a little wishful thinking, but I ain't happy. I'm a man of the Creator. I can't wish horror on people, but you know something? I'm feeling this right now.
But I say that's the way it is.
Okay? And please understand, the European that we know of today is no older than 8,000 years old. The Asian that we know is no older than 6,000 years old.
And that's something.
They haven't been around that long.
All right.
And if Africans had not wandered up into the northern area, they would not exist on this planet.
Okay.
Humans were born to be black, plants were born to be green. That's science. Nothing personal.
All right.
Plants got photosynthesis. Humans got photosynthesis. Photosynthesis make plants green. Human photosynthesis make people black to brown to deeper colors of melanation. That's just science.
Praise the Lord.
And as you move away from that, you become albino. There is even albino plants. And albino plants are white. There's albino peacocks. There's albino gorillas. There are albino lions. Albino alligators, yes. Okay, come on. You know, and what it is that there is a lack of the ability of producing melanin in their bodies. That's just what it is. And that melanin comes out of sunlight. And sunlight makes you brown or black, makes plants green. That's just science. That's not personal.
No.
Wishful thinking, but not personal.
All right.
Okay? Here are the states.
Yeah.
That's why they're moving into your neighborhood. Because they have to escape towns that are dying. That's why you see a lot of them are young, with families, because they're moving into the neighborhoods, our neighborhoods, because white people that are in their neighborhoods ain't moving out. So the only place they can move is in the black neighborhood. So that's why you see them all up along the avenue here in Jacksonville, and why I see them in Harlem, and why I see them in Bed-Stuy, and why they're in South Side of Chicago and in South Central Los Angeles, because they're escaping these blue states where it's dying out. There are towns that are dying out. Close up shop. Ghost towns. Deaths now outnumber, this is part of the article, deaths now outnumber, and think about Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and what she's saying, because that's why we're doing this, to honor this sister for what she was telling us back then is now being recorded and being expected.
All right.
Deaths now outnumber births among white people in more than half the states in the country. 26 to be exact right now, and that was in 2016.
Okay.
Whites are no longer a majority of the American population, although they'll try to make you think they are.
That's right. That's right.
The Census Bureau has projected that whites could drop below 50% of the population around 2045. Now, the way they got us frictionalized and fractionalized is that they're now telling us that the largest minority in America is Hispanic. That's not true.
It's not true.
They are a large part of the population. They are a melanated people with whom I've had a phenomenal growing up experience with. What I'm saying is not personal. It's science. But to keep us fighting each other, they put us in fear of other majority-minority groups. So we keep fighting each other to keep our eye off the fact that they're losing their population. And I'm not even going by 2045. It's like that right now.
Right now.
Do you know there's more of a black population in London than there is white? Right now.
Really?
There's more black people in UK than white people. Right now, here is the literary evidence. Here's Patrick Buchanan. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan, in one of his Savior Day speech, he told us we needed to get this book. In fact, it was in 2002, because he had just read the book. He said, go out and get this book. I heard it on the radio. I went out and I bought the book. Death of the West: How Dying Populations and Immigrant Invasions Imperil Our Country and Civilization. Our. Who's our? That's Patrick Buchanan, Republican, ran for president.
Oh, okay.
Okay? He wrote this book. Here's the information, Death of the West, Patrick Buchanan, Dunn Books, 2002. America has, this is on the first page, America has undergone a cultural and social revolution. We are not in the same country that we were in 1970 or even 1980. Think about what he's saying. Think about that, family.
That's true.
Okay? So when you think about Jackson, this is why. They have to preserve these last moments of their existence. You know when you see a monster show, and at the end you kill the monster, and all of a sudden the music starts getting all happy and whatnot, and then all of a sudden the monster grabs you again, and then you finally destroy it? That's where we are right now. The monster's already dead. White supremacy is dead. But this is the last throes of trying to hold on to at least them old white people dying so that they don't have to deal with it. But they don't care nothing about their children or their grandchildren. Because what their children and grandchildren are going to inherit from what they have done is going to be something that even I cannot describe. It is indescribable what is going to happen when that power finally goes. And we realize that reciprocity is one of the characteristics of Ma'at, along with truth and justice and harmony and balance and order and arrangement. Reciprocity. Reciprocity is my favorite characteristic. What goes around comes around. You shall reap what you have sown. See, y'all finished my sentence. Because you know their children and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, what they're going to inherit from what their parents did to us and to people of melanation all around the world. They're going to pay a price that I think is indescribable even to us. We cannot imagine. When I was a young man, I was breaking out. My face was breaking out. I stuttered. I was pissed.
Of course.
As a young man in my teens, early teens, I watched the fire hoses tearing shirts off black folk. I watched them beat pregnant women. I saw them killing black children. I was trying to figure out what is going on. And I was pissed. And I wanted to kill. I honestly wanted to kill. I can feel it, what I felt as a child, and that's what I know how children feel. But then one day, something came over me. And this was another change in my life, like I told you about the brother that impacted me when I was teaching. And then this is another gateway in my life. Something came over me. I can't explain it as it relates to what happened, but there was somewhat of an inner peace. Because I had worked myself up into such a frenzy. There was an inner peace that came over to me, and I could feel, I'd like to say I felt it, but I know it. It said, do what you got to do. I'll take care of them. And what I got for them is something you can't even imagine. Your neurons are connected to understand what nature can do. See, now that I'm looking back, this is what I was taking in. As a young person, I didn't, and my thing was, and that is where there was other changes that began to occur in me that I realized it was something much larger.
That's true.
Okay? Whoever that feeling was, whatever those words were, it was just a feeling that I had. And from that day on, I was still pissed. But I was able to handle it.
Yeah.
And that brought a peace to me that allowed me to continue doing what I was doing. And this is why when I see, for instance, the families that were murdered in that church in South Carolina, and they forgave the man that killed them, although we may not care too much for that, I do understand why they did that. Because they did that so that they could live.
That's right.
They did not forgive him. What they wanted to do was to be able to go on with life without that hate. There's an African proverb that says that a bitter heart will devour its owner. I've also heard it said that to want evil to come to somebody is like you swallowing poison expecting them to die.
My Lord. My Lord.
What has sustained us is our ability to be able to put things in their proper place.
Praise God.
And it's been very important that we're able to do this, to just understand who they are. And this is what Frances Cress Welsing, in her smoothest ability, was able to do. They see now. This is a different world now. 1970, 1980, for those of us who lived during those times, the formative times, we remember what was going on in America in the 70s, coming up out of the 60s. The assassination of Malcolm X, the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
That's right. That's right.
You know, the assassination of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Robert F. Kennedy. Those are formative years that revolutionized the way in which we thought. Okay? The innocence of America was gone. Okay? And it all centered around us. We didn't cause it, but we caused it. We didn't do it, but we were the cause of it. Patrick Buchanan says, many Americans have seen their God dethroned, their heroes defiled, their culture polluted, their values assaulted, their country invaded, and themselves demonized as extremists and bigots for holding on to beliefs Americans have held for generations. My question is, this is my question, who are those Americans? This is what they're saying to each other now. Let's think about what's going on here. Think of our sister. This is quoted from the United Nations Secretariat, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Population Division, World Population Prospects, the 1999 revision, Volume 1, Comprehensive Tables, November 24th, 1998. They start by saying on page 9, the West is dying. Its nations have ceased to reproduce, and their populations have stopped growing and begun to shrink. Not since the Black Death carried off a third of Europe in the 14th century has there been a graver threat to the survival of Western civilization. Today in 17 European countries, there are more burials than births, more coffins than cradles. The countries are Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, and Russia. The Birth Dearth by here's another book where Patrick Buchanan got a lot of his work. Ben Wattenberg wrote in 1987, The Birth Dearth. There's another book to check out. What happens when people in free countries don't have enough babies? Remember, the magnetism of the female egg, the electricity of the melanated sperm, okay? Fertility has been falling in most of the Western world for more than a century.
Yes.
Demographers, who are population people, demography is the study of populations. Demographers have calculated that by the end of this century, which would be in the 1900s, the beginning of the 20th century, by the end of this century, the English people will be a minority in their homeland. That's what I told you. They already are. I went in 2009. They already are. Okay? That comes from Anthony Brown. In his article, UK whites will be minority by 2100. London Observer, September 2, 2000. Here's Japan. Everybody worried about Japan. Japan will be destroyed in a matter of 50 to 100 years, and children's subsidies aren't going to do it. Only equality is. That comes from Peggy Orenstein, Parasites in Pret-a-Porter, Sunday New York Times, section 6, page 31. This is science, family. This ain't personal. A little wishful thinking, but I'm doing this not to work us up into an emotion. I want you to understand this is science. I want you to understand their numbers are dwindling. They are dying out. But without understanding the Ice Age, it's hard to understand that they're dying out because we think they've been around for a long time, and they haven't. They were a mistake. that Africans made by going into the northern climate north of the 51st parallel and not knowing that an ice age was about to hit them in about 20,000 years. They got all comfortable in this area, and all of a sudden an ice age came from Greenland, came up, created ice mountains across the barriers, and then they were locked into the northern climate, couldn't get out. So what did they do? They did two things. They went into caves and they put on clothes, both of which stopped them from getting sunlight, and the depigmentation process occurred. Don't be surprised, because what happens in New York between the months of, let's say, November and maybe March? Black folk lose pigmentation. Okay? You start to get lighter. Okay? And then, not only do you get lighter, but even your hair texture change. Your hair is not as curly, not as kinky, not as nappy, because of the nature of the sunlight not being able to get to your scalp. And whether you realize it or not, they'll never admit it, but even white people have kinky hair in the summertime. But they don't call it kinky. They call it frizzy. And they go get frizzies from the supermarket in order to get rid of that frizzy hair. Come on, stop. Listen, let me tell you something, family. Okay, we laughing, but you know, our laughter comes from the realization that we are such a great people that we can move beyond the pain and understand and analyze it in order to come to the solutions. On page 22, Ben Wattenberg says, Western men who dominated Africa and Asia in the first half of the 20th century will have disappeared from Africa and Asia by the middle of the 21st century.
Praise God.
Information. Now we're going to get into Bobby E. Wright, The Psychopathic Racial Personality, and Other Essays. Europeans' relationship with the black race. Europeans are psychopaths, and their behavior reflects an underlying biologically transmitted proclivity with deep roots in their evolutionary history. The psychopath is an individual who is constantly in conflict with other persons or groups. He is unable to experience guilt, is completely selfish and callous, and has a total disregard for the rights of others. One of the best methods that can be used to measure the psychopathic traits of the white race is observing and analyzing their universal overt behaviors and attitudes towards blacks. Look at them.
Yeah.
Look at how they act. So when you want to know a psychopath, just look at how they act. And then they look at you and they say, well, what's wrong? Everything's all right? Now, in order to understand a psychopathic personality, one must differentiate between three classifications: the neurotic, the psychotic, and the psychopath. The neurotic behavior. The neurotic is a person who suffers a great deal over problems that are handled fairly routinely by a well-adjusted personality. The major problem for neurotics is an inordinate amount of anxiety. However, in contrast to the psychotic, the neurotic has very good reality contact. They have problems, but they're grounded. They're just very nervous. Things set them off. I know a lot of people like that. The psychotic behavior. The psychotic, in addition to being out of touch with reality, has severe malfunctioning and many times has to be hospitalized for long periods of time. Here you go. The psychopathic behavior. The psychopathic personality is completely absent of ethical or moral development and an almost total disregard for appropriate patterns of behavior. I'm just thinking of somebody right now. Psychopaths know the difference between, and so are you, because you know folk like this probably on your job. Psychopaths know the difference between right and wrong. They simply ignore the concept of right and wrong. Okay? how psychopaths function in society. Now, here's the dangerous thing. The majority of psychopaths function very well in society. They are generally average or above average in intelligence and have engaging personalities. In addition, they are usually very impressive and competent with no feelings of insecurities, anxieties, or any other manifestations of psychoneurosis. They appear to be very honest and humane, but really have no concern or commitment except to their own selfish interests. I'm thinking of two people right now. These numbers grow. Now, there are many more I could list. However, in the interest of time, the Cro-Magnon, Indo-European, Eurasian, all the same person, was given a number of opportunities to return to the original family of melanated people. See, this is auto-genocide. They've been given opportunities to get it right, but they chose not to. And here's some of that. 2000 BCE, when they first came out of the Ice Age, they could have made it with the Grimaldi or the African and returned back to the human family. That was the first time. 700 ACE, North Africans, Moors entering Europe through Spain. They could have said, okay, all right, so let's come together. We're all going to work together. You all brought some phenomenal inventions here. You created universities, and we're going to do this. Instead, Alphonse X translated the Afro-Arabic language into Latin. Latin then became the Romance languages, and then they stole our legacy in the English language, Spanish, French, Italian, Romanian, Portuguese. But they had a chance. They're not stolen the legacy. They could have translated into those languages so they could understand. See, Spanish is a language that was first started to be spoken in about 1526. Spanish didn't exist. French didn't exist. They all came from what's called Vulgar Latin, which was a more particular, familiar way of speaking Latin. And out of that, see, because we don't speak Latin except like in law or in medicine. But the Vulgar Latin, which is vulgar don't mean bad, it just means that it was an everyday language for the people. That then translated into what we today call Spanish and French and Italian and Portuguese and Romanian. Okay? But the reality is that had they just chosen not to steal it and say, let's all come together, you taught us how to build boats, you taught us the compass rose, and now we're ready to move on, everything would have been fine. They had an opportunity, but they turned it down. Castile and Aragon kicked the Moors out, and they took over the world and created Western civilization. Okay? The third opportunity was in the 1300s with the Black Death in Europe. If they had just decided not to get so stink about their attitude, they would have been all right. But they decided, and Africans, with that mer, love, healed them of the Black Death. Because you know what the problem was? A lot of Europeans have a fear of cats, particularly black cats. So they got rid of black cats. And when they got rid of black cats, there was a rat population that grew. And that brought the disease. So they literally had to bring cats into Europe to go after the rats. You talk about psychopathic. 1865, after the Civil War. Okay, we fought for the Civil War. Okay, this was the time we could have got together. White people could have said, okay, we've done this. Okay, let's just all get together and we're going to move on and we're going to do what we got to do. That would have been cool. But they didn't. They created Jim Crow. Okay. Then, in 1965, the human and civil rights movement. They could have turned it around then and said, look, okay, we done some stuff. Horrible, but we're going to change things. But they didn't. Okay? See, auto-genocide. And then, of course, in 2008, 2009, the election of President Barack Obama, where in that alone they could have said, okay, all this that we've done, okay, We got the brother up here. He's probably the greatest president we ever had, although he didn't do much for black folk, but that's okay. He couldn't. The system didn't allow it.
Yeah, that's weird.
Okay, that's just the way it is. Okay, if you're going to step up there, you got to understand, if you eat the king's meat, you're going to dance to the tune. Okay, you just got to understand that. Okay, so these are the times in which they could have changed things, but they chose not to. So it's not that they didn't have the opportunity, they chose not to because they're psychopathic.
Right.
Joel Augustus Rogers, the most brilliant white scientist, said in his book, Sex and Race, the most brilliant white scientists become absolute fools when it comes to race. Dr. Shockley and Murray of the bell curve are classic examples of intelligence in the service of racist institutions or psychopathic behavior. They not only present illusionary scientific proof of the inferiority of blacks, but they offer the solutions to it. Psychopathic. No, this is a brother. This is J.A. Rogers. Okay? And if you really want, I used to kid Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, because in the early 70s, she got on a show called Tony Brown's Journal, where she was up against Dr. Shockley, and she just tore him up. 8 months later, he died. And I told her, you gave him a heart attack. I said, you killed him, doctor.
Wow.
If you go Google it, you can YouTube it. Okay? Journal, Tony Brown's Journal. It was, I think, 1975. I'm not sure about the exact date. But he and Shockley. And I'll tell you something. I had to admire Shockley, though. But he crazy.
Yeah.
But he was willing to come on a show with Dr. Frank. It's obvious that he did not do his research on her. No more than I was in a documentary called Race War, and Jared Taylor, arch racist, was on there. And what the producers of the movie decided to do was to premiere it in New York and have myself and Jared Taylor have a little back and forth. Okay? You can Google that too on YouTube. And when I went into that discussion with him, there was two things I wanted to do. Because I knew, when you go in, you got to do research. So I did research on Jared Taylor. I saw him have a conversation with Tariq Nasheed. I saw him have different types of backs and forth with different people. Okay? And I came to the conclusion the only way that I could make an impact would be to do two things. One is I needed to unsettle him somehow. And then I needed the audience to laugh. Those are the two things I needed to do. He and I went and I began to talk about The Exorcist and about a discussion that the two priests had when they were going up to exorcise the devil out of Reagan, the girl. And the elder priest, who has gone through other exorcists before, and the younger priest, who has never been through an exorcist before, are ready to go into the room, and the younger priest says, Father Merrin, I'd like to talk to you about the different manifestations that I've seen come from Reagan. And as he was talking, Father Merrin said, Demi, stop for a moment. No matter what manifestations you see in that room, there is only one devil in the room. Jared Taylor is the type of person that will say, I'm not a racist, I'm not a white supremacist, I'm a white identist. Okay? I'm a white nationalist. And what I was trying to say was, you can call yourself a white identist, you can call yourself a white nationalist, you can even call yourself a white supremacist, but there's only one devil in the room. He got very offended at that. Okay? I'm beginning to unsettle him. Okay? And then I begin to explain to him the importance of understanding the difference between a neurotic, a psychotic, and a psychopathic personality. And as I'm talking, and I face the audience now, and I'm explaining this to them. I'm not looking at him, and I'm explaining to the audience about this phenomenon. about these different types of personalities. And when I get to the psychopathic personality, where he says that they are average to above average and that they are quite able and they get along with everybody, and the whole time that I'm saying this, I begin to look at him as I'm explaining, and the audience is understanding what I'm saying, and they start to laugh. Okay? This is how you have to do it. Because when they come at you, one of the things that they do is they get you pissed off. They'll get you pissed off. And when you get pissed off, they got you. So what you got to do is you got to keep it humorous. Somewhere in this discussion, I'm telling him about the pride of black people and what we've achieved. And then I get into him, and I said, but you know, Mr. Taylor, your first wife was Japanese, and you have 2 daughters from her. I said, do you know the Japanese people are black? Do you know that the Japanese island was formed when Kushites brought South Koreans onto the island and met the original Ainu people who were black? I said, is that why you feel that way towards black people? Because your wife is black and your children are black. Both of your daughters are black. Okay, now he really starts to get himself. Because a lot of people don't know his wife is Japanese. Okay, so I get into his business. Because when I'm going to face somebody like that, you better get in there, you better do your research. Don't be prepared for what you're about to face. And then you got to go in with your plan. My plan was to unsettle him and to have the audience laugh. Okay? Somewhere in this I'm talking about, and you know, I'm explaining to him, did you realize that at a time when the Star-Spangled Banner was being considered to be the national anthem, do you know that another song that was put forward to become the national anthem was Lift Every Voice and Sing? Do you know he started singing it? And then he lost the words, and the audience busts out laughing. That's what you do to them. Okay? That's how you deal with them. Because if you approach them in anger, you'll get the crowd upset. But that's not going to make you successful in terms of what you want to do. I know they're psychotic. I know they're psychopathic. So deal with their psychopathy as opposed to attempting to let them mess with your head. Because my mama used to say, when a sane person is talking to an insane person, the only thing that's going to come is that the sane person is going to go insane. Because the insane person is living in a world that's very acceptable to them. They're loving their life. You're the one that has a problem with where they're coming from. So you're going to try to change them. And you ain't going to change them. Because they believe in what they believe. In fact, they believe more in what they are than you believe in what you are. And that's where you're going to lose faith. This is who they are. And this is what Frances Cress Welsing did to Shockley. She messed with his head. And Tony Brown, well, Google it. YouTube it and watch it yourself. To watch the sister at her top of her game. That sister was something else. Because I always said, you don't want to kill him. The fact that blacks have been enslaved and or oppressed for over 350 years in a democratic America, Christian to be exact, should be evidence enough. Dr. Clark used to say they have never been democratic, they never been Christian, and they would trip over it if they fell over either one.
So sad.
The age of ice. Let's go into what they experienced. This is what Africans did. Here's the map. Here's the Caucasus Mountains in Georgia. Here's the Caucasus Mountains, the Ice Age mountains. This is the mountains. This is where Africans were caught in the northern part. And they could not return back because the Ice Age made these like ice mountains, like ice barriers. They could not come back south if they wanted to. Plus they had been in this area for thousands of years and got used to it. So they didn't leave. Okay? Just a visual. You know, you're going to get a PDF of this. So, because I want you to be able to see this from just beyond this presentation. Here's what you're dealing with in terms of the ice ages. Parallel north, which is like the cap on top of the earth. Okay, it's like a hat. It cuts through Ireland, cuts through England, cuts through Holland, goes all the way around Asia, and it comes back around, and it comes through America. Okay? This is the Ice Age. This is where Africans were caught. About 1.75 years ago, okay, you have the first one. You're going to have the Gunts in Europe. In America, it's called the Nebraskan because they counted according to how far south the boulders went, the ice boulders went, and they went as far as Nebraska. in the first one. In the second one is the Mendel. It went as far as Kansas. The third one was the Riss, went as far as Illinois. And then you had the Worm Ice Age, which went down as far as Wisconsin. But we as a people only have to be concerned with the Worm Ice Age, because humans were not here at this time. The first human, Grimaldi, comes about 50 to 40,000 years ago. And they come during a warming trend called an interstadial. The earth was warm, Europe was warm, so when they came here, it wasn't no problem. It was temperate, a little cool every so often, but they could deal with it. So they stayed. But what they didn't know was that another ice age was about to come. And in the second part, the Worm II Ice Age, came about 40,000 years ago. And so from 40,000 to about 20,000 years ago, these Africans living in this cold climate, you're talking about 20,000 years, Africans being exposed to temperatures that went as low as 200 degrees below zero. Jesus. See, we complain when it's 5 below. Think about when it's 200 degrees below zero. Think about what happens to your brain, your pineal gland. What happened in the brain is the pineal gland sits in your limbic system of the brain. It's like a grape. It's plump. It looks like it looks like a pine. That's why I call it pineal. Okay. When Africans went into Europe, and they were exposed to the freezing temperatures, the pineal gland, like a grape, you put it into the sun, it becomes sun-dried. The pineal gland in the brain, in the ice, became freeze-dried, and it became calcified. And just like a raisin is a grape that's all shriveled up, a calcified pineal gland is a hardened, the life has been sucked out of it through the freeze. Just like the sun makes a grape, a raisin, the ice, cold weather made a plump pineal gland become calcified and hard. And by 12,000 BC, the Worm Ice Age ended. Africans continued living in this part of the world, and they came down about 2000 BC, like I showed you here. About 2000, when they first started coming out of the ice mountains, because the ice mountains melted, and they came out of the mountains. And they came with a calcified pineal gland. And when people say to me, what's the difference between a calcified pineal gland and a healthy pineal gland? I always tell them the difference is Soul Train and American Bandstand. For those of you who remember American Bandstand and the way they danced on American Bandstand, and you saw Soul Train, the way they danced on Soul Train, okay, that's the difference between pineal and calcified. Okay? Here is what the glacial map looked like. This is the ice mountains in America and in Europe, all up in this area. It's like a cap on the thing. And it was cold, very cold.
So when did they flip the map, though?
Say that again, brother?
When did they flip it?
Flip what? When
I went to Egypt. Yeah, Africa flipped up.
Oh, yes, yeah. Well, because that is the orientation of how Africans looked at the world. The Africans look at the world from south to north. But let me drop something else on you that I think is important also. I don't know if they were aware of the orientation of the earth. They were aware that the Nile River flows from south to north. And here in Jacksonville, you have a very unique relationship with Kemet. Because remember that hotel I stayed in? That I looked at the St. John's River? The St. John River flows from south to north, very unique. Any river system that has its origin south of the equator goes from south to north. When you're north of the equator, the river flows north to south. So we go, we say we're going down south and up north.
Right.
But on the St. John's River, you go down north and up south, because you speak in terms of the flow of the river. Okay? That's very unique to Jacksonville. Okay? And so when you look at this, Africans, okay, I do this when I have a globe. Okay, I have a globe. Here's north, south, east, and west. What I want to do now is I want to take the globe and I want to turn it here, where east is here. Because we orientated ourselves towards the sun. That was the one natural thing that always was. This 23 1/3 thing, that's it. But when you get up into space, there's no such thing as a 23 1/3 degree angle. It's only like that because we're on the earth. But the reality of it is, if you turn that map so that the east, or the globe that east is here, the earth rotates this way. In the travel of the sun. Think of nature. Okay, this is unnatural. This is not important. Okay, you turn it this way, east is here, this is the way the earth travels. It travels east to west through the rising and the setting of the sun. Okay? However, there is a north to south reality that we have to face. That has its place. But we were not orientated. This is why all of the temples and everything, this is why in Islam you face east. But tell me, when you're in India, which way do you face? As a Muslim?
You have to face west.
You have to face west.
Yes, to the Kaba.
But do they? Because I've always heard they face east. And really it is because the grounding of Islam comes out of Kush, where it's east. So when you're looking at the Kaba as a stone, that is one of the last remnants of an astronomical observatory. The black stone. That's why you circle it 7 times. You do the same thing in when you go to Karnak. They had the same activity where you circled that it's a scarab. You circle that 7 times. Because Islam came out of the mountains of Ethiopia. And Bilal brought the concepts of the Amharic traditions from Ethiopia into Saudi Arabia, because there was a direct relationship between the west coast of Saudi Arabia and the east coast of Africa. It was the kingdom of Sabah, which is 7 in Kiswahili. So that when we study and look at the scientific orientation of the earth and you see what it is, you can see that Western civilization is not very bright.
Okay.
This is taken from, we have a decade to prevent a total climate disaster. Family, one of the most important things we have to face is global warming. All of this man-made racism and things that we're experiencing, that all has its place. But if we don't understand, see, we black folk have been around on the earth long enough to have gone through cooling and heating cycles. Europeans weren't around the last time we had a heating cycle. They've only experienced a cooling cycle. They ain't been around long enough. Plus, they don't remember. Africans have been around the earth understanding that there is a cooling and there is a warming trend. Now, in Jacksonville, I know the weather is really very nice. You know, but I'm coming from New York, you know, on Friday. It was chilly.
Wow.
Okay? And the day before was my birthday. And I could walk around without a jacket on.
Really?
Yeah, I went to the Bronx Zoo. I had to visit my family. So I went to Congo land. I paid my respect to the gorilla. Okay, I had to go home to have a family reunion. I know that disturbs some people, but really understanding the gorilla, bone for bone, muscle for muscle, every organ and gland in the same place.
Praise the Lord.
The only difference between a gorilla and a human is that we have more melanin in our locus coeruleus, the black dot. and even gorillas. You know, Harun Nasset was making comment that when I went to the Bronx Zoo the last time, I took pictures in the gorilla, and that gorilla was throwing up gang signs. He was behind me throwing up all sorts. I mean, we have to understand, we've been around long enough. The gorilla and the ape, humans did not come from the ape. But we have a common ancestor called Ramapithecus. Some of us went down on the earth, some of us remained up in the tree. Those that remained in the tree became the pongids, or the great apes, and those that came down on the ground became the hominids. And out of that came the human family. The ones that stayed up there, they, apes and chimpanzee, orangutan, thing like that. The point I'm making is we have a warming trend coming on us. Growing up, I never had a birthday where I could go without a jacket. Never had a Halloween that I didn't need an overcoat over my costume. Okay. We have never had the warmth on the earth that we're having now. We're breaking records. And what is going to happen is that there is a trend occurring that they've been denying because they know what if they accept it will happen. There is a global warming. The report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change outlines what a world warmed by 1.5 degrees Celsius or 34.7 degrees Fahrenheit would look like compared with the 2 degrees Celsius or the 35.6 degree Fahrenheit warmer world enshrined in the Paris Agreement and the pathways to get there. It shows that a 1.5 degree through 34.7 degrees Fahrenheit warmer world is much less brutal than a 2 degree, 35.6 degree Fahrenheit warmer one, and that we have a lot of work to do in a very limited time in order to achieve it. We did not cause the warming trend. The warming trend was coming anyway. What we did is we polluted the land, the water, and the air. And in so doing, we allowed the toxic pollutants to remain in us, and we're ingesting it. That's what humans did. The warming trend was coming anyway. It's part of the worm-2 interstadial. See, the one thing about astronomy and looking at the world from a cosmic perspective is you're dealing with trillions and billions of years. When you deal with world history, you're dealing with what Western civilization gives you. So when we step back as an African people and look at the world through Shabaka stone, look at the world through the cosmos, we're dealing with many more thousands of years of existence. As opposed to Europeans who ain't been around that long. They're seeing the world as it is now. They don't know what's coming. And we've been trying to tell them this for a while, and they ain't listening. And so now here they are trying to get tanned, and they're enjoying the warm weather. You saw what's happening? They're dying of melanoma. That's for real. That's for exactly. There's a book called Saving Your Skin by Barney Kennett and Patricia Lawler. They did not write that book for us. They wrote that book for them because the story is telling them. And they put it out right in June, and they put it as right in Barnes & Noble in the front because they wanted all white people to get that book because that book told them, keep yourself out of the sun. Because they don't understand what's happening. And now they so much want to be you, they're risking their life by sitting in them things look like coffins. And suntan, they just love to be brown. They just want to be you. The melanin injections, okay, this is what they're doing. They're taking melatonin. Now they're finding out the worst thing to do is take. See, melanin is produced in the pineal gland. It's secreted through your body in the absence of the sun. In the presence of the sun, melatonin becomes serotonin. Okay? Serotonin prepares your body to produce the melatonin at night. Melatonin at night prepares your body to produce the serotonin during the day. And what melanin does, number one, it slows up the aging process. It creates fertility, and it allows you to sleep. Black folk ain't got no problem sleeping. Give them a good meal, itis will kick in 15 minutes. We ain't got no problem sleeping. I say that in jest, but we don't have a problem sleeping. They have a problem sleeping. We don't know it because they don't tell us these things. But like they get up many times during the night and can't sleep. I'm not talking about if you have to use the restroom. I'm talking about if you get up because you just can't sleep. Okay? And that's why they were taking melatonin. They were taking melatonin in order to be able to sleep. That's why they encourage you to take it at night, because melatonin is present at night. Okay? And we just don't know.
We just don't know.
But I'm here to tell you.
They do it in Norway. They get that Africans like Somalians.
Yes.
And take it out.
Okay.
They get more money for that than doing like 3 blood plasmas.
Yes.
So, because their thing is they bring in the Africans in Norway because they know they're dying.
Yes.
Because they have no melanin. I mean, if you've seen white folks,
Yes.
they're the whitest people. You can see their
Oh, yeah.
veins. I mean, all the way through. They're almost translucent.
Yeah. And blonde, and some even platinum color hair, the bluest of eyes, and that all comes from a lack of melanin. See, the book I'm writing is going to bring some things out. And it's not meant for any particular group. It's meant for anyone that wants to understand what melanin does in the human body.
They don't clot. They get cut. They cut a long time.
That's right, keloid skin. See, when black folk get cut, we get keloid. Okay? Keloid is an internal doctor that overwraps your skin so that you never get cut again. When their skin is so thin. You see, the thing about melanin in the skin is like if you put your hand here, right, and you leave it for maybe 10 seconds and then you take it off, your skin will come back. Okay? When people with less melanin, Europeans do that. They put their finger here, that indent will stay there the rest of the day. Okay, when you wear glasses, okay, sometimes you leave imprint here. For most of us, when we take our glasses off, in a couple of hours, our eyes have returned back for the most part. With them, those marks remain for days. Because melanin creates, it's not hard, it creates an elasticity in the skin. Okay, where there's a bounce back constantly. That's what the melanin does in the epidermis of the skin. And this, again, going back to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, this is what she was talking about. You know, to understand that during the 4th worm ice age, temperatures dipped to an estimated 450 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. Now, I don't use 450 degrees Fahrenheit because I once did a presentation in a college and I talked about that. And there was a professor of ecology that had come to my presentation. And he came to me afterwards and he said, you know, I'm following what you're saying. But it didn't go down as far as we have no evidence of it going down 450 degrees below zero. He said, because that really would have frozen people up. And I said, well, how cold would you say it got? He said, I'd say maybe 221 degrees below zero. I said, well, that's cold too. So I'm careful. I put this here because of what they said. But in reality, I don't know if it got this cold. But it did get cold. 220-something degrees below zero average a day. Okay? And sometimes there was no summer.
So it's like Alaska.
It was like it all the time. Think of what Africans went through. You talk about enslavement. Nature enslaved Africans up in the northern climate. Okay? All right.
Underground, right?
Say again?
It's underground during that time, right?
And that's the key, because all ice ages start underground and they come up underneath you. So that by the time you realize that it's an ice age, the mountains have already frozen and you're stuck there. So you don't even know to escape. If it had just come at you this way, you would have run away from the ice. But because it came up underneath you, you never understood what was happening. And it froze the mountains, the Pyrenees, you know, you can go across all of this area. There's nothing but mountains in this area, okay? At this temperature, most of the skin and brain lose melanin synthesis, bringing it together. Melanin is an electrically heated molecule that helps animals and humans sense who and what they are in all parts of the brain, brain and body. Because of the extreme cold, the European ethnic stock lost sense of who and what they are. Now, understand this about your third eye, your pineal gland. The calcification of the pineal gland. Think of the pineal gland as a grape in the center of your head behind your eyes, in the third ventricle in the brain. Healthy pineal gland looks like a plump grape. When the grape is exposed to the sun becomes sun-dried. This sun-dried grape becomes a raisin. When the pineal gland is exposed to the cold and ice, the pineal gland becomes freeze-dried. This freeze-dried pineal gland becomes a calcified pineal gland. People who have calcified pineal glands as an ethnic stock have a primary intention, because of the xenophobia or fear of the foreign, to colonize all who are not like them.
Articles in the newspaper talking about the decline of Western populations.
Yeah, here's the Washington Post, just to name one. We are a depopulation bomb, the withering of the Western world. Here, incidentally, this was the percentage of the West's population in 1900, the turn of this century, about 30%. This is where we'll be less than 10% in the year 2075. Here's where we are about today, 15. So we're not having babies.
So whites are not having babies, and there is the concern about white genetic annihilation. In other words, I look at, this is Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday holiday, and people will say, well, here's a man who talked about love. Yeah. Why was he killed? And I say that the deeper logic is, what if all black and white people and non-white people and white people love? What would happen to white